Let's call this meeting to order. This is a meeting for January 11th, 2011. Regular scheduled meeting of the Assembly. Madam Clerk, please do the roll call.
Ms. Drummond. Here. Mr. Birch.
Here.
Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Ms. Johnston. Here. Mr. Trainee.
Here.
Mr. Flynn.
Present.
Mr. Starr.
Here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Honeman.
Here.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Here.
And Ms. Osiander. Ms. Osiander? Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. You need the volume, ma'am. Paul, would you listen to the pledge? I understand you're never going to be younger than you are tonight. I understand you're reaching, half century tomorrow morning?
After midnight, yes, sir.
Okay. Do you need us to give you the verbiage, or do you know it?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I know, Paul, you thought you were going to sneak out here without telling us.
That was my hope.
Didn't work. Next item of business, item 4A is minutes of the regular meeting, November 9th, 2010. I need a motion on the minutes.
So be approved.
Any discussion on it? Ask unanimous consent to approval. Those minutes, Madam Clerk, are approved. Next one in front of us, item 4B, regular meeting, November 23rd, 2010.
Move to approve.
Moved in second. Any discussion on it? Seeing none, that is approved by the body. Now we're down to Mayor's report. Mr. Mayor?
Well, in the interest of time, sir, no report today.
Thank you. Down to the Assembly's chair report. You'll find on the addendum to the agenda, there's an item that I'm bringing forward for concurrence of the Assembly. It's to, I think it's on the addendum or it's on the regular one. It replaces our former ombudsman with a new individual that's coming to join us for a 4-month period initially. So you'll see her on there. We're now down to committee reports. Debbie?
The Title 21 committee is still on hold until we get a formal document from the administration.
Thank you. Mike?
I have no committee report, Mr. Chairman, and you beat me to the punch in pointing out that our public safety chair hits the century mark at the stroke of half-century mark.
Ooh. Forgive me.
The half-century mark at the stroke of midnight tonight. He's old enough to be my older brother.
I'm maybe going to go close to that. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You get teary-eyed guy.
If I get a little red here, I feel a little hot. Anyway, be as it may, we do have a public safety committee scheduled for tomorrow, yes, on my birthday, tomorrow at noon. We're bringing on the topics is of desire to talk by Anchorage Char about the lack of taxi cabs or available taxi cabs around the holidays, in particular to pick up, to particularly perform the duties of off the road that they sponsor and fund through their Anchorage Char. Also, we'll talk on at least a preliminary basis about the fireworks ordinance that were passed, and we'll try to set some dialogue and time for I'm sure a meeting. I know I had over 200 emails alone on the topic, both pro and con, and so they believe it merits some discussion. Thanks, sir.
No problem. Ernie?
No report.
Bill?
No report. However, the Budget and Finance Committee did meet between Christmas and New Year's, and we will have some comments during the action items tonight.
Okay. Pat?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll be kicking the Public Safety Committee out of their room no later than 1:30 tomorrow afternoon to take up some important committee items. And that's all.
I'm sure the governor will like that. Jennifer?
No report.
Elvie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report, but I just want to advise everybody, and I'll confirm this with the clerk to schedule it, but I'm going to have an audit committee meeting on February 11th at noon. Mr. Raskin is already aware of it, to talk about the police and fire retirement audit and the assembly responsibilities that were brought out in that audit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chris?
No report.
Harriet?
No report, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to confirm with the chair of the Title 21 committee that there are no further Title 21 committee meetings scheduled at this time, because they were all over the What's Ahead that came out the other day.
Thank you. Go ahead.
That's right, Harriet. Basically, I am trying to meet with Dan Coffey to try to find out heads up of what the big topics to be discussed are. I did contact the clerk, but I don't think it's gotten in the calendar yet, that we're going to just hold off on those until we have something concrete to work on. I don't think there's any point in going through amendments if it's amendments to a document that's potentially going to change.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Sure.
And I'm sure the public does too, because I'm pretty sure that's posted.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thank both of you. Next item in business is addendum to the agenda.
Move to incorporate.
Second.
I'll go over it. It's item 9A4, Resolution AR 2011-18, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly designated January 17, 2011 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service, encouraging volunteerism and recognizing community service projects honoring the legacy of Dr. King. This is from all the Assembly members. Item 9D15 under new business, the same memorandum AM 35-2011, temporary appointment of Barbara Jones as acting municipal ombudsman. Item 9D16, the same memorandum AM 37-2011, change order number 1 to purchase order number 240104118 with City Electric, Inc. for relocation of underground electrical facilities at Tudor Road / Lake Otis Parkway for the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska Municipal Light and Power, MLNP, $444,442.42. That looks strange, doesn't it? They like the numbers. Item 9F12, Ordinance AO 2011-6, an ordinance authorizing the terms of acquisition for approximately 15-acre parcel within Powder Ridge subdivision, Tract 40A, generally located west of the Glen Highway and Terrace Lane, funded by the Anchorage School District for approximately $775,000, including options to acquire alternative parcels, and a right to repurchase, designate, and acquire site as a school site, and waiving certain requirements regarding placement in or disposal from the Heritage Land Bank. Anchorage School District, public hearing requested 2/111. There is an accompanying a semi-memorandum AM 40-2011. Down to item 9F13, Resolution AR 2011-19, a resolution appropriating a Federal Transit Administration grant of $4,104,662 and a contribution of $82,093 from 2010 operating budget area-wide general fund 101, Public Transportation Department to the Public Transportation Capital Fund 485, Public Transportation Department for capital and maintenance assistance, $552,000 of the grant, and a contribution of $88,000 from the 2010 operating budget, area-wide general fund 101, Public Transportation Department to the Federal Grants Fund 241, Public Transportation Department for the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, Paratransit Services and Facilities, Maintenance. Public hearing requests on 2/111. There's an A with it, a semi-memorandum, AM 38-2011.
Mr. Chairman,
Is there anything else to add? Yes, Patrick.
there is a laid on the table item, Assembly Memorandum 41-2011, referring to the Assembly's grant to the Federation of Community Councils. I believe that item should be labeled 9 Delta 17.
Is that right, Clerk? That's correct, sir. Thank you. Administration, you guys have one too?
Not down here either.
You don't have one either, Debbie?
Neither does
Oh, you want a copy of this? I'm sorry.
the FCC one.
I
Yeah.
don't have one either.
She didn't have a copy.
It's real short, so I'll pass it down and we can read it as it goes by.
I see Family Leave Act.
Is that all right, Debbie?
The man is going to make copies.
I think we'll get you some copies, Deb. Thank you. Is there anything else that needs added to the addendum to the agenda? Is there any objection to the addendum to the agenda? Not seeing any. We've amended the document in front of us. I now need a motion on the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
We moved and seconded. We'll now go to those items that we want to pull for a little further discussion. I'll start with you, Debbie, and then I'll work my way down and come back to administration. Debbie?
Since I haven't seen the one, what number was that?
That was 9D17.
All right, I'd like to pull D17 and on the regular agenda, A2.
Thank you, ma'am. Anything else?
No.
Mike?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull, I believe it's on the addendum Alpha 4,
Yes.
and from the regular agenda Delta 3.
A4. I got A4. What's the other one, sir?
Delta 3, and that's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Paul?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just getting a note from council here, so I'm not, I may have to come back to you on a couple.
Because you're almost 50?
That could be. I'd like to pull, I'm not sure if it's been pulled yet, 9A1.
9A1. Okay.
And there are several items under the consent agenda, 9D, but it's 3 through 7, and I'm just getting a note here. I'll look through council if I can get back to you in just a second.
Okay. Ernie?
No items.
Mr. Starr, sir?
9 Delta 16 off the addendum, and a conjunctive item there, 11 Delta also go together, I think. 9 Echo 3.
You can't pull one of them. You can pull, and I'm sorry because I told you to, but it's 9D16. You can pull that.
I'll take 9D16.
But the other one, we have to wait till we get to it.
Got it. 9 Delta 16 and 9 Echo 3.
Delta 16, 9 Echo 3. Thank you, Bill. Thank you. Yes, Patrick.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item 9, Foxtrot 2, from the regular agenda. And just for the information of the body, the administration has asked this ordinance not be introduced at this time, so I'll ask for no motion when that comes up.
Okay.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Jennifer, ma'am?
Yes, I'd like to pull 9 Alpha 3 and 9 Delta 2. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Elvie?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chris?
No items.
Harriet?
No items, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
To the administration? Okay. A2's already been pulled. That was pulled by Debbie. Let me read the note I got.
Yeah.
Okay. Paul?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull on the consent agenda items 9 Delta 3, 9 Delta 4, 5, 6, and 7. And this is for the purposes of some issues that need to be addressed further on license renewals.
Thank you. Is there anything else that needs to be pulled by the body? Not seeing any. Let me bring it up. Please vote on the balance of the consent agenda. Those items that were pulled that were not, those items were approved that were not pulled for a little further discussion. So we're going to go back to item 9A1. That's Resolution 2011-1, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and honoring Anchorage Police Officer Jesus Rivera III for his valor, professionalism, and service to the community. That was pulled by Mr. Honeman.
Yes, I believe.
Move to approve. Motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second?
We have motion and a second. Is there unanimous consent? Seeing no objection, that item is approved. Who's presenting? Who's reading? Okay.
I believe I have the honor of reading, Mr. Chairman.
Now, the family members that here that want a photo, come on down front, because it's easier if you just face that way to get photos, okay? I've seen people try and do all sorts of strange things. Just come on down front.
A resolution in Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and honoring Anchorage Police Officer Jesus Rivera III for his valor, professionalism, and service to the community. Whereas Officer Jesus Rivera III was hired by the Anchorage Police Department in June 2009 and served in parking enforcement until his academy began in December 2009, and whereas he has worked mid-shift patrol since graduating from the police academy, is known for his keen sense of humor, and has jokingly described himself as a, quote, lowly rookie street cop, unquote. And whereas, while patrolling 4th Avenue on September 12, 2010, Officer Jesus Rivera III witnessed a physical altercation among a group of men outside a local bar. And whereas, when a man brandished a handgun and started firing at another male, Officer Jesus Rivera III announced his presence and yelled to the suspect to stop shooting. And whereas, when the suspect started running while carrying the handgun, Officer Jesus Rivera III chased the suspect and held him at guard until additional officers arrived. And whereas, without regard for his own life and confronting a much larger adversary, Officer Jesus Rivera III uses training and superior safety techniques to pursue and capture a suspect without additional shots being fired or further threat to human life. And whereas, Officer Jesus Rivera III demonstrated courage and professionalism in a volatile, stressful, and dangerous situation. And whereas, in October 2010, the Anchorage Police Department and its Employee Recognition Board presented Officer Jesus Rivera III with the Medal of Valor for exceptional courage in saving a human life and protecting property. And whereas Officer Jesus Rivera III displayed initiative, commitment, and outstanding dedication to the Anchorage community, now therefore the Anchorage Assembly recognizes and honors Officer Jesus Rivera III for his valor, professionalism, and service to our community, passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly on this day of 2011.
Jesus, you can come and talk to us. It's fine.
I don't mind.
It won't bite.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for the recognition that you've given me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Other questions from Assembly members? Doesn't appear to be any right now. Thank you very much for your service to the city. We need a lot more like you out in the streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Next one that was pulled is item A2, Resolution AR 2011-2, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and honoring Anchorage Police Senior Patrol Officer Jean Mills for her perseverance and service to the community.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and second, ask unanimous consent, seeing no objection, that item's approved. Who's breathing, who's presenting? Okay. If anyone wants to take a photo, come on down front.
This is a resolution recognizing and honoring Anchorage Police Senior Patrol Officer Jean Mills for perseverance and service to the community. Whereas Officer Jean Mills is a field training officer hired by the Anchorage Police Department in August 1998 and has served as a mid-shift patrol officer her entire tenure, primarily in East Anchorage. And whereas on June 9, 2010, when performing a traffic stop on a suspicious vehicle, Officer Jean Mills approached the driver, requested a license, registration, and proof of insurance, and when the driver turned around, she realized the driver was armed with a .40 caliber semi-automatic handgun as he began shooting. And whereas struck by gunfire in the extremities and torso and suffering life-threatening injuries, she retreated to her patrol car for cover. And whereas once in her patrol car, Officer Jean Mills overcame intense pain, summoned help on her police radio, broadcasted information about the situation to fellow officers, and provided a very good description of the suspect in the vehicle. And whereas Officer Jean Mills continues to demonstrate courage throughout this ordeal and unwavering determination to return to full duty as soon as possible despite her lengthy rehabilitation. Whereas in June 2010, the Anchorage Police Department and its Employee Recognition Board presented Officer Jean Mills with the Police Shield for her courage and valor under extreme duress. And now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly recognizes and honors Officer Jean Mills for perseverance, courage, and determination to return to full duty. Congratulations.
I guess I would also like to say thank you so much for the support that all of you have shown throughout this ordeal, for the support of my family, my friends, my APD family. It's just been amazing. We all, as I say, as officers, we know the risks we take, and we go out and we do our job as best we can, hoping we're never going to end up here getting this award. But I'm very pleased to get it and very grateful, and I thank you all.
We have a few questions for her, if you don't mind, ma'am.
No problem.
And is Officer Allen here?
He is.
Where's he at? Come on down.
Absolutely.
We'd like to see both of you, please, if we could. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not really a question, but a comment, I guess, to both of you. And as I was listening to Ms. Osiander reading that, I thought, holy cow, I'd probably want to not hear those words read over again and recall it. But I just wanted to say to both of you, thank you. And it looks like you're both doing well. You look great, and we're very, very glad to have both of you here tonight. I know you probably would rather not be receiving that tonight or this recognition, but we're darn glad to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Honeman.
Well, yes, point of personal privilege of having worked in the profession, I can tell you that the last time I can recall 2 police officers being shot on the line of duty happened on the same day. If I remember, in the late 80s, Mr. Gary Newcomb, a wanted fugitive, shot 2 officers trying to apprehend him in a Mountain View barber shop. And so it's been that long ago. I was working here at the time, not as an officer, but working with the police department, and I remember the day fairly vividly, and had the chance to visit with both these officers who were injured in 2010. Mr. Gutierrez and I actually talked about how rough 2010 was and some of our losses, and in this case here, our good fortunes and blessings. Not too many officers who were shot in the line of duty are as blessed and fortunate to stand before us today and receive accolades that you willingly deserve. And not to put a price tag or bring anything to it, but I just want to say if we were paying officers $100 an hour in a mere matter of about 10 minutes' time, that's $10. And if we were going to give that, if we were going to offer that up to anybody in the audience that would take $10 and go out and take a bullet for somebody, I'd do it right now willingly. And these guys and gals are doing it every day. So thank you. You're my true heroes, and appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from Assembly members? Mr. Sullivan, sir. Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Just on behalf of the administration and all the citizens of Anchorage, we're just absolutely delighted that both of you have recovered as well as you have, and look forward to seeing you both back in service. Thank you.
Thank you so much for what you do. You know, a lot of us have children and grandchildren in this town, and you're what's out on the streets protecting our children. And you guys are just remarkable. Thank you for your dedication every day. And the injuries you've had, we really appreciate it. I hate to see you have to come down to visit us, but it's nice to see both of you healthy. So congratulations, and thanks for being here and serving the citizens of this town.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9A3, Resolution AR 2011-17, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly honoring and remembering Senior Policy Advisor and former Chief of Staff Larry Crawford.
Move to postpone till our January 19th meeting.
Second?
Move to second to postpone to the January 19th meeting. Any objection to that?
18th.
Not seeing any.
18th, sir.
18th? Okay.
Yes.
We'll get there. Yes.
Before we proceed too long, I'd like to note that one of the executive appointments is present in the audience tonight, Mr. Lance Ahern, and I believe we approved that. Okay, I'm sorry. Jump the gun.
Okay, the next item is on the addendum to agenda. It's item 9A4, Resolution 2011-18, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly designating January 17, 2011 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service, encouraging volunteerism and recognizing community service projects honoring the legacy of Dr. King. Mike, you pulled that, sir.
Move to approve.
Ask unanimous consent. Not seeing any objection. That's approved. Mike, who's presenting and who's?
I believe Ms. Gray Jackson is presenting.
Okay. In your reading, sir?
Yes.
Good.
A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly designating January 17, 2011 as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service, encouraging volunteerism and recognizing community service projects honoring the legacy of Dr. King. Whereas in 1994, the United States Congress expanded the mission of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day to include a national day of community service, and whereas the goal is to have all Americans observe Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a day on, not a day off. And whereas the late Coretta Scott King said of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service, the greatest birthday gift my husband could receive is if people of all racial and ethnic backgrounds celebrated the holiday by performing individual acts of kindness through service to others. And whereas participation in the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service has grown nationally and volunteers from across the country have taken part in various service projects such as tutoring and mentoring, preparing and delivering meals, building and repairing homes, schools, and senior centers, as well as teaching and reflecting on the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And whereas the municipality of Anchorage has joined in this celebration of public service and birthday by designating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a day of community service since January of 2008, and whereas it is of great importance that the community of Anchorage continue to join with others to honor the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with a commitment to serve. And whereas on January 16, 2011, at 3 p.m. at the Performing Arts Center, the Martin Luther King Foundation invites residents to a community-wide celebration honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and celebrating the diverse Anchorage community through music and dance performances. And whereas from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Monday, January 17, 2011, the Anchorage Park Foundation, Parks and Recreation Department, local businesses, and organizations will participate at the Spenard Recreation Center in the annual 50 Bikes, 50 Kids project, which provides new bikes to deserving young people in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service. And whereas on January 18, 2010, the Alaska Bar Association and the Alaska Court System inaugurated the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service free legal clinic, where 110 volunteers served 150 people and performed 426 hours worth of legal help valued at approximately $26,260. And whereas this year on January 17, 2011, the Alaska Bar Association and the Alaska Court System will expand its free legal clinic to include a discrete shelter site as well as the public site at the Mountain View Community Center from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m., offering free legal advice and information with volunteer attorneys in the areas of family law, landlord-tenant law, and public benefits law to those in the community who cannot otherwise afford legal services. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly resolves January 17, 2011 is designated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service in the municipality of Anchorage. And the Anchorage Municipal Assembly commends and appreciates the Alaska Bar Association and the Alaska Court System, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service Free Legal Clinic, the volunteers and sponsors of the 50 Bikes, 50 Kids project, and encourages other organizations and volunteers to plan activities of service for those in need on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day of Service.
Chair of the Assembly and to the Assembly constituents throughout with respect to administration, to Mayor Sullivan and all that are gathered here today. I want to thank you for this contribution. I'd also like to recognize in brief that the Assembly has been part of the undergirding of the MLK celebration in our city from its inception in 1986 when Governor Sheffield brought much of the process into activation with our community. This year we are focusing upon our youth, and our theme is Dare to Dream. We have a number of dignitaries coming who will be presenting our youth and passing the mantle of community involvement and embetterment to our youth. We trust that the Assembly will be with us. Many of you we've sent an invitation, but we wanted to give you a personal note of that. We sent one to the administration and to our mayor. We hope that each of you will be present on Sunday and throughout the week as we celebrate the principles of Dr. King and his dream. I challenge you today for a better and a finer world. Dare to dream.
Thank you, Reverend. We have a few people that would like to talk to you for a minute, if you don't mind. Thank you. Paul?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge and recognize and thank Reverend Dr. Patterson for his continued and steadfast spearheading of the MLK celebration statewide. I'm noted on the calendar for that statewide. There's many celebrations, and I'm just so thankful that you've made sure that has happened, sir, because that's so important. And secondly, to challenge any or every person, if not, to remind you that if you ever get a chance to visit Memphis, Tennessee, and the Lorraine Motel, the National Civil Rights Museum, I've been there. I took my family. It was one of the better trips I've ever taken. Very informational, very educational, and very inspirational. So thank you, Dr. Patterson. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to thank Dr. Patterson for his many, many years of involvement in this community and involvement with the Martin Luther King Foundation to just make sure that Dr. King's dream is kept alive through one small thing, as a matter of fact, and that's that memorial down on the park strip that you worked so hard to make sure that it stays in very, very good shape. And I really appreciate your efforts, as I'm sure the rest of the body does. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Elvie. Thanks, Reverend. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you,
and
sir.
thank you, Abby.
Next item in front of us is on page 3. It's item 9D2, same memorandum, AM 9-2011, confirmation of executive appointment. Lance Aaron.
Move to approve.
Jennifer.
Second.
Jennifer?
I just want to take the opportunity to welcome Lance. I've known Lance for a long time, and I just want the mayor to know that I introduced Lance and Lucinda, another one here, through Google-Fi, and I hope you're all happy. I am very excited about the prospect of having Lance, and Lance might like to come up and introduce himself to the rest of the assembly.
We take care of one business. Ask unanimous consent. Should no objection, it's approved. Okay, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, and thank you, Chairman, and the Assembly. And thank you, the Mayor, Mr. Mayor, for reaching out, and to the administration. I definitely look forward to serving with all of you and working together. I didn't prepare any remarks. I thought about preparing some acronyms, but I didn't know how well that would go over. The one thing I would say is that, what we do in the IT world is we try to build systems that scale out well to, increase the efficiency of how things work together. And I think that's the same thing, what we try to do in the IT world that we're going to try to be doing in government. We want to have a small government that scales well so that we can be efficient and really support a lot of growth without growing the size of government. And we'll apply the same principles that we do in IT to how we support the government. So thank you.
Thank you. We have a few questions for you. Harriet?
Thank you. No questions. I just want to welcome you also. I was very, very pleased to see that you're being appointed to this position. I know the city has been in need of an IT director for quite some time, and I couldn't be happier. I had an Alaska.net address for years, and I appreciate you very much for that.
You were one of the first. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lance, welcome aboard. I was reading through your very impressive CV, and I just had one question. What did the administration get on you?
Say it again. What did they get on me?
Never mind. You don't have to answer that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Those only comments, sir. Thank you. Welcome aboard.
Thanks. Take care.
Now we're down to item D3, and it was kind of odd because Mike pulled this one first, then Paul, you came through and pulled the rest of them. So Mike, Assembly Memorandum AM 1-2011, you pulled that one, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we take up D3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 together.
That's fine.
Thank you. And I would move to approve all of those.
Second.
Okay, your motion's to what?
I'm sorry.
Well, she wants us to.
We have to push the clerk's buttons.
Sorry. She would like us to approve them separately. And
Separately then. All right.
do the first one.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I pulled.
So you're going to move AM 1-2011.
Correct. 9 Delta 3.
And that was seconded by Paul.
Mr. Chairman, I pulled these because there are several that have notice of violations, and notice of violations that include servers not having up-to-date the required state training. And I'm wondering if it's possible. I know that looking at Delta 3, the last day to protest these licenses is January 28th. We have a meeting between now and January 28th. I would like to pull those that have notices of violations to look at their past history to see if these are isolated incidents or to see if there is indeed a pattern of conduct there.
Dennis, could you help us with this little question?
Mr. Chairman, I've been consulting with Assembly Counsel on what the process has been over the last 5 years, and I think she has a recommendation on how you might be able to handle these within the time period.
Julia?
If you don't mind, I'd defer to her.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Through the chair, my recommendation on these is to pull them and postpone action on them until next week's meeting. And at that time, the Assembly can consider proposals from Assembly members to take action that would allow the licensee the opportunity to participate with a public safety committee review and or participate with 21-day notice in public hearing to comply with our local law on participation as necessary. But the week will give Assembly members a time to, and the legal department in time to prepare that paperwork that could not be prepared at the last minute today before the meeting.
Mike, on advice of counsel, why don't you change your motion to postpone this item to our next meeting?
One quick question,
Go ahead, Mike.
Mr. Chairman, to counsel. When you say to postpone them, do you mean the entire item or just those licensees that are showing violations?
Just the licensees that show violations. I think that what you want to do is to bifurcate.
You're going to bifurcate the issue.
That's what I thought. Then Mr. Chairman, that would be my
motion. We're not going to bifurcate anything. We've done that before. Bifurcate works all right, Mike.
That would be my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Okay. The motion is made to bifurcate the issue. So basically what we're going to do on the first one is we're going to approve those items that do not have an allegation of an ABC violation. The rest of them we're simply going to postpone till the next week. Is that correct, counsel?
Yes, that's my recommendation, Mr. Chair.
First motion is to bifurcate. Yes, Debbie.
Madam Clerk, don't we need to specify the names of the establishments?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Council, do you have time to now go through them tonight? I mean, we can postpone these till later and come back to them tonight.
Well, Mr. Chairman, with
Amanda, do you know which ones? Okay, she's got the list. Read the list, Amanda, any that are on D3.
Through the chair, in D3, it is Birch Tree Dining, number 4528. Din Hao Restaurant, number 4123. And Samurai Sushi Garden, number 4529.
And that's the only ones that are subject to this bifurcation, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
They have violations.
So first we need to vote on bifurcation. So let me bring it up. What'd that one do? I thought I brought that up.
it was there and then it was gone.
What? Is there any objection to bifurcation? Clerk's making it easier for me. No objection, so we bifurcated. So on the first one, on the bifurcation, we've voted to bifurcate it. So for the ones that Amanda said qualify as ones we want to postpone to the next week, I need a motion on those.
Move to postpone
to next week.
To next week
meeting.
or the next meeting?
Next
The next meeting,
Is next
those that show notices of violation.
Okay.
Second.
And, okay. Is there any objection to that? Seeing no objection, we've approved that. Now, Mike, give me a motion on the rest of them so
I
we
would,
can approve
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the balance of those remaining that show no violation.
Okay.
Second.
Is there any objection to that? Not seeing any, that's approved. Madam Clerk, did we mess it up enough? Okay. The clerk would like us to use our buttons. Okay, now moving down to item D4. That was pulled by you, Paul. That's the same memorandum, AM 2-2011, 2011-2012 liquor license renewals.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would make the same motion to bifurcate the items.
Okay.
It's consolidated for the renewals of liquor license for those that also have violations listed.
Amanda, can you tell us which ones?
Second. Push the button.
They're on there.
Through the chair, Asia Garden Brandy's, number 83. And Carousel Lounge, number 200.
First motion is to bifurcate. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Move to postpone those two items.
Second.
I need to get a vote on bifurcation according to my clerk. She's telling me what we need to do. Okay, we've got a motion and a second on bifurcation. Is there any objection to bifurcation? Not seeing an objection, we've done that. Now, on those that are bifurcated, I need a motion to postpone those to our next meeting.
Move to postpone Asia Gardens Brandy's, number 83, and Carousel Lounge, number 200.
Second.
To our next meeting.
Is there any objection to postponing those items to our next meeting? Not seeing an objection, those are done. Now I need a motion to approve the rest of them.
Move to approve the rest.
Second.
We moved in second to approve the rest. Is there any objection to approval? Not seeing any, we've got that done. We're getting better at this, aren't we? Okay. Paul, I will tell you one concern I have with some of these licenses. One of my children, they're an adult, went to one of them, and they had a party there, and one of the girls that was there asked if she could have an alcoholic beverage. And when they brought the beverage, she said, "Are you going to check my ID?" They told her, "No, if you're old enough to drive, you're old enough to drink." And that's one of the ones we've already pulled. So I do have some concerns over this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, let's do 9B5.
9 Delta 5, Mr.
9 Delta 5, sorry. Need a motion to bifurcate on that one.
So we need a motion to bifurcate for those.
Second.
Okay, and which ones, Amanda?
To Go Mart 71, license number 3732. And Costco Wholesale 10, license number 2020.
Okay. Go ahead, Debbie.
Move to postpone Go Mart license 3732 and Costco Wholesale license number 2020.
Second on that, ask unanimous consent. See no objection. We've bifurcated and set those out, and that's to postpone those for a week, Debbie?
To our next meeting.
Is there any objection? Seeing none, we've done that. Now I need a motion on the balance of them.
Move to approve the rest.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Ask
I can't.
It won't come up.
unanimous consent. See no objection. We've accomplished that. Now, we're down to item 6. which is same memorandum AM 4-2011, 2011, 2012 liquor license renewals.
Make a motion to bifurcate those.
Okay. Amanda, which ones are those?
Rum Runners Old Town Bar and Grill, license number 4157, and the Blue Fox, license number 140.
Okay. Those are the ones. Now, any objection to bifurcation? Not seeing any objection to bifurcation. We've done that. Now, Debbie, I need a motion, if you would, ma'am.
Move to postpone Rum Runners Old Town Bar and Grill, license 4157, and the Blue Fox, license 140, to our next meeting.
Second, Paul. Thank you. Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, we postpone those, and I need a motion on the balance.
So moved to approve the remaining licensees.
Okay. Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, that's been approved. We're now down to item 9D7.
Moved to make a motion to bifurcate the...
AM 5-2011.
Second.
Motion was made to bifurcate that issue. Which ones are we talking about, Amanda?
To Go Mart number 2, license number 2803, and To Go Mart 15, license number 4054.
Is there any objection to bifurcation? Not seeing an objection, we've bifurcated. Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, that item will appear at our next meeting, and thank you, Amanda. She says we need a motion on postponing. I'm sorry.
Move to postpone license To Go Mart number 2, license 2803, and To Go Mart number 15, license 4054.
Need a second.
Second.
Our next meeting. Need a second. We got
Second.
that. Ask unanimous consent. Not seeing any objection. That's accomplished.
Mr. Chairman, move
Need
to
a
approve the
motion on
balance. Move to approve the balance of the
Second.
licensees.
Okay. Is there a second?
Yes, sir. I seconded.
Ask unanimous consent. See no objection. We've accomplished all those wonderful little items. Thank you. We're now down.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I want to thank Ms. Osiander for her indulgence in moving the motions and thank the body for our attention. We will address these for the next meeting.
And I would like to thank Amanda. And, ma'am, thank you very much for leading us through that little path. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If I can just jump in for a second. I don't have a dog in this fight, but as somebody who has an ownership interest in a license, I just would advise the Assembly, if you look through, these notices, you've got 3 at least that are pulled that are almost 3 years ago. I mean, that was the last violation. So you're painting a fairly broad brush there when you pull everybody who's had a violation. You look at Costco, Ding Hao, Asia Gardens, you're talking July of 08, you're talking, it's just, I think a little more scrutiny in the ones you pull. I mean, more recent activity certainly, I think, rises to the attention as compared to those that are 2.5, almost 3 years ago for their last violation. So, just
Well, I would add, Mayor, that a NOSA violation doesn't mean convicted of it. It just means a NOSA violation. Harriet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I agree with the mayor. I was going to make that same comment. I apologize for being out of the room. Most of these violations did occur before we started paying attention and made the move on the 100% ID check, so I agree. However, I still think that these operators do need a heads up, and I think we need to be serious about it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now moving over to the addendum to the agenda. Mr. Starr pulled item 9D16, a same memorandum AM 37, 2011, change order number 1 to purchase order number 201-04118 with City Electric Inc. for relocation underground facilities at Tudor Road, Lake Otis Parkway. Mr. Starr, I think your motion was to postpone this item to our next meeting in conjunction with another one that's showing up.
Move to postpone to February
Second.
1st.
Second. Hit your button, Mr. Starr.
We're moved and seconded to postpone this item to February 1st.
Right, with just also some guidance, perhaps if we could have some additional information on the role the DOT played in the project management. I'd like to have a conversation with the project manager. His name is Bobby Lucanis. He worked for Quality Asphalt Products, in specific to the dump site opportunities that these vendors had, as well as how the import materials were billed. I can perhaps go seek that, but I'd like some administrative help if I can get the concurrence of the administration to help answer some of those questions.
Administration, can you help us with that? I'll set a work session up.
Yes, sir. I'd prefer a work session to take care of that one as well as 11 Delta
Right.
when we get to it.
We'll set the work session up to get that done, George. Paul?
Since we're going to do a work session, I'll remove my comments. Thanks.
Okay. So we'll just set a work session up with that, Bill. Okay. And then we're back on page 4. It's item 9E3. It's Mr. Starr, Information Memorandum AIM 3-2011 Monthly General Government Revenue Status Report to the Assembly as of December 13, 2011.
Move to accept.
Second.
And
Mr. Starr.
As Chair of Budget and Finance, I've had several months in previous years where December was very rocky for me and very upsetting. I could have pulled all the information reports, but I chose to maybe just focus in on this one. However, kudos needs to go out to all of them, and I know that our Assembly body started to read them as well. I saw some of the questions asked on the investment reports, and I saw some questions asked on the budget to actual summary reports. But again, not to pontificate too much on this, I'm pretty proud of our financial team, and I'm pretty pleased that the action items as it relates to information flowing into this body is starting to gel. Jennifer Johnson and I, in particular, spent a lot of time several years ago trying to tailor reports that mean something to this body to help make decisions, and we're starting to see them. The one I pulled tonight has a couple different factors in it. It's the report on general revenue status. And again, there's some point of clarification that I'll perhaps let the mayor talk about just for a second as it relates to additional revenues. But if you look at the note here on the first page of 9E3, line 25 speaks to a surplus of about $508,000. And granted, that's a summary of real-time data as they dumped it into the system through December 13th. But what we found from Dan Moore and his group over there was consistent and timely information as it related to revenue streams as they flowed into the municipality. That gave us the opportunity, although we didn't need to perhaps reduce revenues or reduce expenditures or watch appropriations as money became tight. And I'm really proud of him being able to produce that time and time again upon demand. I'd like to see it condensed a little more timely, and so that we can react a little bit quicker to expenses and revenues. But I can't tell you enough how comforting that is to have that data flow, as well as it's now January 11th. We don't have to wait necessarily for the cumulative financials that would perhaps surprise up to us in March or come as we do in first quarter financials. So, maybe put these on your desk, and as you guys have some time, read how they play out. I'm not going to go into the other item where the BlackRock question was talked about, nor the budget actual expenditures by department, but we saw very little overspending as we came into the high spending times of December. And, again, it could be 15 minutes worth of discussions on the financial management that I'm seeing, and I'm pretty proud to be a part of it. I don't take credit for it because that's probably entirely the mayor and his directives, but that said, I just urge acceptance and read and study with one comment, as the mayor would want to speak to the additional revenues generated by Alyeska Pipeline. That doesn't mean we have a $5 million revenue surplus yet. I'd like to see that answer handled so we don't go off and spend that money and need to pay it back later. So, Mayor, do you have a second to just talk?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Starr, through the chair. Obviously, there's a payment that came from Alyeska Pipeline for essentially property tax on the holdings they have in our area, which is significantly less than other municipalities were granted. But the cautionary note is, of course, that they've appealed this to the Supreme Court, and if we do not prevail in court, we not only owe this money back, we owe 8% interest on the money. So the challenge is, in the meantime, as you're holding this money, to try and at least earn that kind of return so that if we are required to pay back some or all of it, that we don't lose money on the deal. So it's a challenge. And so your point is well taken. We don't want people to think all of a sudden there's a surplus. This may be months or years before it's determined whether or not this is money truly to be given to the municipality or not.
Thanks for that clarification. And just, again, point of kudos for your management, Mayor, especially in the fourth quarter. I really appreciate it myself. Thank you.
Well, I would concur with your statement that we have a great financial team. Thank you.
That's all, sir.
Is there any other comments on 9E3? Yes, Debbie.
Mr. Mayor, did we ask this judge where we can get this 8% return? I'd like to know.
We'd all like to put our money in that investment, wouldn't we, Ms. Osiander? Yes, thank you.
Any other comments on this?
Yes.
Except
Yes,
this item?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Paul. I've got to go back to another thing I missed on there. So, on this item, yes, Paul?
Do you have to go back to the first one?
I have to go back to 9D17.
Barbara?
before I get beat. Barbara, don't go. Come on down. We're not letting you leave that easy.
First of all, I want to thank Mr. Starr for his tenacity, and I have been reading these reports, and I do thank you for your guidance on making sure that the reports come in, and we have been hitting the same message, making sure it's as timely as possible so we can keep the most up-to-date information. Looking forward to see what the year-end books do show. As I understand, there are some surpluses, perhaps even more than the 508. I know there's projected, but we won't know until essentially all the bills are paid, so I'm looking forward to that. And then the other thing, I guess Ms. Oceana kind of beat me to the punch, and that is there any legal, and I guess I'd ask this to the administration or perhaps Mr. Wheeler, are there any legal steps that the municipality can take? Is this a result of a lawsuit on the taxes based, a suit filed by the municipality or by the state of Alaska? It seems like we're getting passed through a penalty and interest here, and I would think that perhaps if the states file the suit and does the calculations, perhaps they have to join in on some of this 8%, and should we lose this?
Through the chair, Assembly members, the case came about because the state assessment board responsible for valuing the assets valued them higher than the owners of the pipeline thought the value should be. They had the right to appeal, which they did. The court order set the value even higher than what the original assessment by the board was, and so the owners are now appealing that decision. The interest rate is, as I recall, statutorily mandated, so it doesn't fluctuate based on any sort of CPI calculation and so forth. It's just a straight line 8%.
Paul, do you have any problem with accepting this item? I need
No, not at all.
Get it done. Seeing no objection, that item is approved by the body. Barbara,
Mr. Chair.
thank you for coming to join us. I'm going to take him over to personal privilege. We've been looking for somebody with your qualifications as ombudsman, so thank you for coming to join us. And I appreciate getting the 4-month exemption you had from your other job so you can come and join us. But thank you very much, because you fill such a vital role between the citizens of this town and its government, because sometimes there are mistakes made and omissions, and the public really doesn't understand who to call, and you're the focal point. So thank you for coming to join us. Any questions from Assembly members? Yes, Debbie.
I just want to share with other Assembly members who haven't had the opportunity to work with Barbara my incredibly high impression of her. She is extremely organized and extremely professional, and I'm looking forward to her work in this position. I think she's going to be great. I had the opportunity right before the meeting to grab her and say, yay! But I encourage you all to sit down and have a chance to talk to her if you haven't already. You'll be impressed.
What I want to do with her is, after she's had a couple of weeks to get used to the office, is to have a work session. Because sometimes the Assembly doesn't know what the Ombudsman does, so I'd like to get a work session together so we can talk back and forth. Paul?
Yeah, and I too have, I still second that motion. I've worked with Ms. Jones in her AERC capacity and found her to be very professional and very responsive and very committed to her duties. So welcome aboard, and look forward to the future with great things.
Thank you.
Other comments from Assembly members?
Mr. Chairman, I believe I'm in the queue as well.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike.
I jokingly said to Barbara before the meeting started that I was going to pull her off the agenda. I didn't pull you, I promise. It was Debbie that brought you up here. But I had the pleasure, Mr. Chairman, of working with Barbara with the Equal Rights Commission as a member of that body for a couple of years. And you and I ran into each other on the way into City Hall a couple of weeks ago. And I remembered commenting to you, I was thinking the night before, you know, Barbara Jones would be awesome in this position, but we'll never get her. And I'm very, very, very glad to have you. For those who haven't had the pleasure, Barbara's professionalism is absolutely unparalleled, and her integrity is beyond question. And in this position, where that office is the last line of defense for a citizen who's really getting worked over by city government. And I'm just ecstatic to have you, even if it's for a brief period of time. So thank you.
Well, I gave up your dinner money for this, so I thought I'd tell you. Other comments? Yes, Albie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. I have to say that I have had the pleasure of knowing Barbara for many, many, many years, and I'm just ecstatic that you're going to be working with the Assembly and the rest of the municipality, and I want to welcome you aboard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other comments from Assembly members? Yes, Jennifer.
I was just going to suggest, Chairman, that maybe for that work session it be one of our joint meetings with the school district?
I think it'd be good, ma'am. We'll do that. Anything from the Assembly? Ernie, I want to thank you, because if it wasn't for you, Ernie, Barbara would not be standing here. She turned me down a couple of times because I sent Ernie to close the deal. Thank you, Ernie. I appreciate it. But thank you, Barbara, for coming to work with us, because you fill such a vital role for the citizens of this town. And your reputation precedes you, so thank you very much for agreeing to do it.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr.
ma'am.
Chair. I'm very humbled. I'm not sure I deserve all of the nice things that you had to say, and I'm looking forward to the challenge in the position, and I am going to need your help. So I will take you up on those offers.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Good night.
Going back to item 9D17. Debbie, you pulled that.
Second.
Debbie?
No, now I've read it, I know what it is. So urge approval.
Other comments from Assembly members? Yes, Elvie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one comment. I'm looking at the fund certification, and it says non-encumbering various funds, and somebody can correct me if they think I'm wrong, but I think that what it should say is 101-1020-3815, because that's where contribution, 3815 is contributions to outside organizations, and that's usually where that Federation grant money comes from, and I believe it is in the clerk's office budget, which is 1020. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Any objection to approval of this item? I'm not seeing an objection. This item's approved. Moving down on the agenda, we're now on page 5. It's item 9F2. Patrick, you pulled that one.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, at the request of the administration, we don't want to introduce this, so I'd appreciate no motion.
See no motion, we move on.
That was an amendment. I'm sorry.
I know, but we can pick it up.
Okay. Yeah, it needs to change. Yeah.
I know.
Okay, but it needs to change. Thank you.
Just to make sure we get the right numbers.
Happens all the time.
Okay. What? We have a gentleman that wants to come and talk to us. Is Ron Chandler here? Ron? I don't see Ron here. What? Second time he didn't show, huh? Okay. Okay. Well, they're down to item, let's see. We're going to item 11A, Board of Adjustments. This is the appointment of Michael Jensen.
Mr. Chairman,
there is no motion pending.
I move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this appointment? Ask unanimous consent. Not seeing an objection, item is approved. Is he here tonight with us? Doesn't appear to be. That item is approved by the body. Next one is item 11B, which is Resolution Error 2010-364, resolution adopting 2011 legislative program for the municipality of Anchorage.
Mr. Chairman, I move the S version, which we discussed at our Friday work session.
Second.
Moved and seconded for the S version. Patrick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe before you should have at least 3 floor amendments. And on behalf of the administration, I'll move amendment number 1. This is from Ms. Frasca, clarifying that the Yosemite Drive project, which we find on page, Debbie, this is yours. Tell me. Thank you. Page 18. The appropriate project description should be Yosemite Drive drainage as opposed to Yosemite Drive upgrade.
Your mic, Deb?
I got it now.
Okay.
It might be easiest to just delete the rest of that language because the descriptor on the length is no longer applicable.
That's fine to make that change. So let's just call it, that line would read only Yosemite Drive drainage.
Thank you.
I need a second, please.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Ask unanimous consent. See no objection. That's approved. Patrick?
We'll turn this next one over to Mr. Honeman since he drafted it, I believe. Actually, let's take this next one, the floor amendment it says insert on page 27, relates to the
Yes, if
Alaska
you would, please.
Family Medical Leave Act. I'd go ahead and move that one.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion on that one. You've got it in front of you. Inserts on page 27, Alaska Family Medical Leave Act. Is there any objection to approval of that item? Not seeing objection, that item is approved. Yes, Patrick.
That's all that I had. The last one belongs to Mr. Honeman. I'll leave it to him.
Mr. Chairman, I have, it's a floor amendment. It was included in email to all members here late last night, early this morning. And there has been, through discussion with my colleagues, particularly Ms. Osiander, I thank her for her attention to these details. So if you look at the heading, it's listed in email from the clerk, Grunstein. It's reference page 24 under listed finance, and the second subheading would be unfunded mandates. And I'm proposing that an amendment to the one you see before you, and it's I'll point it out on the first line. It'll say the MOA, or municipality, strongly urges the state of Alaska to take financial responsibility for the mandated, and this is where the change occurs, and unfunded required exemptions described by Alaska Statutes 29.45.030. And then the remaining language after mandated would be removed, which is the highlighted in dark portion underlined. So then he continues on with the language as stipulated.
Paul, do you have a printed copy for our clerk?
I have what I have scratched out. It's basically what we have presented before you with my scratched out amendments. So yes.
What? Can we have Amanda make copies of that so we know exactly what we're dealing with, Paul, if you don't mind? Yes, Harriet?
And have you moved that as a...
I was going to second that if it's ready to be seconded.
You may give it to Amanda?
Yeah, if you would, please. I just want to make sure, huh? I want to make sure we have a copy before we vote on it. I'd like to make sure everybody, including the clerk,
Is it the email?
has a copy.
Is it the email?
Huh? I know. But it helps just to take the second to get a copy of it.
I have Yosemite.
I made sausage before around here, and I don't much like how it works. Huh? No, I need Coke. Thank you. It'll just take a second for it to get here.
Mr. Chairman, while we're waiting, can I ask the administration what the distribution of this report will be and how this is handled to our legislators? Do we deliver that, or do you actually get it to them another way as well?
Is that a question of me, Mr. Starr?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm talking. Yes, we actually go down to Juneau and physically meet with each legislator, go over the package with them as we're presenting it to them for their file, so they'll have it for the duration of legislative session.
So we bind copies and that sort of thing, or do we have email traffic, or what other mechanisms are there?
Well, it's available on email, but we do give them hard copy.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. We'll pay you mileage later.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Are you good with it? Okay. Any objection to the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, well, if no assembly member does, I do.
Your comments, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Well, one of the things that is included in Mr. Honeman's amendment under nonprofit, religious, charitable, and hospital exemptions, under charitable, I mean, now you're talking the Red Cross, you're talking Catholic Social Services, you're talking a lot of agencies that provide an awful lot of good in this community. Under hospitals, you're talking Providence Hospital. So to ask the state to fund those, I don't think is realistic. They're certainly not going to do it. And if you look at community benefit that these organizations provide, I think it far outweighs the exemption. I know there's concerns about some religious organizations who, maybe stretch the limits of staff and personnel, but I think our assessor's office has done a pretty good job of working with those groups. We require refiling every year. and we audit those, but to include, again, charitable hospital, I think that's reaching way too broad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Debbie?
I actually think that this is an improvement over what he originally proposed. I went back and went online and looked at the state-required property tax exemptions. There's 3 pages of them that are extremely detailed and deal with an incredible variety of things besides the senior center and the senior citizens and the disabled veterans. I think the point of the proposal is just to emphasize that there's a significant loss in property tax revenue that we experience. I don't think it means, and I certainly doubt that anybody would read it to mean that we don't support some of these exemptions. It's just that the state should step in there and help the portions of organized boroughs that depend on property tax exemptions more thoroughly. So.
Thank you. Paul?
Yes, and I've just brought up by Ms. Osiander, we could continue to line out and the extension or exemption of state-owned property that shifts the cost of protecting that state-owned property and stop there. The reason is that's also included in the state statutes 2945-030. So we could line that out as well.
Okay.
So I'd make that motion.
Well, Paul, I think what you've got on here, I think will work for the body.
Okay. And
thinking of, I teach history for the university, and I was dealing with the French Revolution recently. And part of the reason I had the French Revolution because the churches that were tax exempt owned a third of the real estate. And the rest, and the clergy wasn't being taxed. The nobility wasn't being taxed. The poor average person was the one that was picking up the tax burden for everybody else.
Mr. Chairman, that's what I'd like to point out, and I appreciate the comments from the administration. I think it's fairly stipulated that the exemptions are broadly supported, but to point out that back in the original parts of the statutes where they exempted these properties, when these first became statutory law, there was almost a 95 or better percentage reimbursement of the funds that were lost to the municipality, at least certain of these functions. So that tapered off over about a 10-year period, and since about 92, 93, we've had nothing in direct refunding of these, what's become known as unfunded mandates. So I think the language speaks for itself, and I urge support of this.
Debbie, before you vote, last comment?
I didn't know if you caught his second amendment, sir, which was to delete the words "and the exemption of state-owned property."
No, I didn't.
That I seconded.
Where's that at, on what line?
Well, you see where he crossed.
Second line.
Just continue his strike through a little bit longer.
Okay.
So you're striking through "and the exemption of state-owned property," and then the remaining part of the language.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir?
It might be helpful if someone could just read the amendment as it reads.
Paul, can you just read it to
I'll
us,
read it.
please? He's correct.
It will read, the MOA strongly urges the SOA take financial responsibility for the mandated and unfunded required exemptions described by Alaska Statute 29.45.030 that shifts the cost of protecting and serving such properties to all other local taxpayers. While such exemptions are broadly supported, Anchorage taxpayers who are not eligible for such exemptions bear an overwhelming and increasing burden for such properties in comparison to other cities and local communities in Alaska. The MOA urges the legislature to resist passing mandates to local governments that are unfunded.
That's what we're voting on. Is there any objection to this particular amendment? Not seeing any that's been added into it, Paul. Thank you for your work on this. We now have back in front of us the amended document. We have the S version of AR 2010-364, the S version. Mr. Michaelis?
Yes, sir. Just a technical correction, please. On page 20, Yosemite Drive is mentioned there. As you know, it's mentioned in two different places, one for alpha listing and then the other was by district. So we would probably need to make the same amendment on page 20 on Yosemite Drive that we did on the preceding document.
Debbie, you want to make the motion?
Yeah, thank you. I apologize. I'd like to move that, and I'm looking for it right now. Page 20? No, not on this one.
It is on page 20. It's not. It's sort of below Mountaineer Drive and above Westchester Lagoon, Chester Creek flooding.
Got it. So basically, it would just read Yosemite Drive drainage, and so you would...
Madam Clerk, I'm sorry.
You would delete the words also Yellowstone Drive to Eagle River Loop Road, and substitute the word, and put in drainage.
Any objection to that amendment? Not seeing any, that's been approved. Anything else, Debbie?
No.
Okay. We'll vote on 11B. I think I killed the thing. That was approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 11C. This is the same memorandum, AM 692, 2010, recreational award to SMG of Alaska, provide management and operation of the George M. Sullivan Arena, Ben Boeke and Dempsey Anderson Ice Arenas for the municipality of Anchorage. A little history on that one. Let's see, we had postponed that one. Motion to approve is on the floor. I'll need a motion on that one. I think the recommendation is to postpone that to our next meeting.
Until,
Because it's not
February
been to the bid review board yet.
It would need to be postponed to the 1st of February.
Okay.
With a work session scheduled for the 28th of January.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved in second. Is there any objection? Seeing none, we'll make a work session, Madam Clerk, and we'll get that done. That's approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 11D. This is a same memorandum, AM 667, 2010. Charge number 1 to purchase order number 20104-118 with City Electric, Inc. for relocation of underground electrical facilities in the Tudor Road / Lake Otis Parkway. Bill, that was your other one you need to postpone.
Move to postpone this one indefinitely,
Second.
sir.
Moved in second is indefinite. George, do you have any problem with indefinite?
Not at all.
Okay. Motion is to postpone this one indefinitely. The administration has no opposition to it. Ask unanimous consent. Not seeing any objection. That one's dealt with. Before we get into new public hearings, we're going to take our dinner break, and then we'll be back. We'll start picking up
Mr.
new
Chairman?
public hearings. Yes, sir.
Do we not have an appearance request on the agenda?
I did. I announced earlier, and he was not here.
Thank you.
What? Is Rod Chandler here? Nope. Madam Clerk tells me it's the second time. So, anyway, when we get back, we'll get on item 13A and move on from there. Take our dinner break now. Thank you. A, under continued public hearings. This is ordinance AO 2010-88. It's ordinance submitted to the qualified voters of municipality of Anchorage at a regular municipal election on April 5th, 2011. A ballot proposition amending Anchorage Municipal Code Charter Articles 2 and 14 to authorize a majority vote for a sales tax, resulting in a dollar-for-dollar reduction on allowable property tax to be collected. Last time we dealt with this, we moved to send this to committee, but since it came back on here, I need to reopen the public hearing, and then our action will be after that. I'll close it or continue it, and then we'll move it back to committee. It's one of these things that have just showed up. So if anybody wishes to testify on this issue, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record, spell your last name for our clerk, please. Hearing and seeing no one, we're going to continue this item to our next meeting, Chris, and what we'll do is send it, or do you want to continue it to the, what do you guys want to do?
Well, this was one that went to the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, and we did hear it at our meeting, but I think it's more representative perhaps to have a greater dialogue, so some of our committee representation, although we don't vote in Budget and Finance Committee meeting, was to send it over to the Economic Development Committee that Ernie chairs.
Okay.
To get some dialogue from the user group.
And then we'll come back to the body.
Probably. I don't know the time frame on that, sir.
Okay. Ernie, can you want to take responsibility for bringing this back to us at some point in time so it doesn't get lost permanently, and then we'll set it for public hearing?
Thank you.
And the clerk reminds us it has to be approved by February 1st if it's got to get on this year's ballot.
Understood.
Okay? Any objection to that? Seeing none, that item will come back after Ernie's committee's done with it. Thank you, Ernie. We're now down to item 14A, Ordinance AO 2010-90, an ordinance of the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, authorizing and providing for the issuance of general obligation refund bonds of the municipality to provide funds required to refund certain outstanding general government obligation bonds of the municipality, providing for for the form and manner of sale of said bonds.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the clerk, and spell your last name if you would, please. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed. So what's the wish of the body? It's moved and seconded. In discussion from Assembly members? If not, please vote. That item is approved unanimously. Next item in front is item 14B, Ordinance AO 2010-89, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, authorizing borrowing and accepting from the State of Alaska Clean Water Fund an aggregate amount not to exceed $12 million for the purpose.
Waive reading.
Okay, this is for the Girdwood wastewater treatment facility upgrade. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward and state your name clearly for the clerk and spell your last name, please. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved and second. Any discussion from Assembly members?
Just real quickly, Mr. Chairman, I was at a AWU meeting here, or a presentation, and it's my understanding that Girdwood and I believe maybe perhaps part of Eagle River have actually tertiary cleaning plants, and yet we're a primary phase cleaning in here in the actual Anchorage Bowl. So I support the upgrades. It's actually pretty interesting.
Thank you, sir. Please vote. That item was approved unanimously by the body. Next item in front of us, item 14C, Ordinance AO 2010-91, an ordinance authorizing disposal sanitary sewer assessments located on Tract A, REM, Briarcliff Subdivision, and Tract B, REM, Pogo Subdivision, Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Second.
Discussion from Assembly members. Please vote. That item was approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14D, Ordinance AO 2010-93, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code Sections 3.20.010 and 3.20.070 to restructure the Office of Municipal Manager to realign Division of Safety into a section under the Division of Risk Management. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one, public hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
And it was moved and seconded by Jennifer. Discussion from Assembly members. Please vote. That item was approved unanimously. Next item in front of us is item 14E, Ordinance AO 2010-92, an ordinance submitting to the qualified voters of the municipality of Anchorage at a regular municipal election on April 5, 2011, a ballot proposition amending Anchorage Municipal Code Charter Section 14.03 to add a new section to define base amount in the calculation for the tax increase limitation, tax cap. It's from Assembly Member Birch. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record, spell your last name. You have 3 minutes or longer if we have questions.
Okay.
Welcome to the meeting, sir.
Howdy. I'm Bob Griffin, Griffin. And I just wanted to testify on this item. It's really kind of sad that we have to put this up to the voters. This has kind of been the convention of the way the tax cap has been calculated over the history of the tax cap. And I think that any members that might be opposed to putting this on the ballot it really sends a pretty strong message to the voters that you're in favor of changing the conventions of the tax cap and in a way that doesn't allow the voters' approval. It really boils down to what we feel are the essential services of the government, and if we're getting enough government money to do the job. Alaska, we looked at with a combined state and federal spending in Alaska, about $34,000 per person. it's pretty amazing that we still have some of the highest property taxes in the country. The Tax Foundation, recent figures in the Tax Foundation shows median property taxes for the U.S. in 2009 was $1,917 a year. In an ADN article on the 29th of April 2009, the median property tax bill for Anchorage was $4,688. According to the database of the Tax Foundation, out of 796 counties and boroughs, municipalities that were audited, 701 of them had lower median property taxes than Anchorage. It's really kind of stunning, with the fact that our state revenues are 99% higher than the number 2 state and 230% higher than the average state revenues, that we have to collect these kind of property taxes. And just getting back to this item that's at hand here, I think it's important that we limit the growth of government, and people that would vote against putting this up, allowing the voters to vote on this. Basically, it sends a strong message that philosophically we're not collecting enough money from the government to get the job done, and I don't think that's the case here.
Question for Assembly members. Harriet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming, Mr. Griffin. I'm just curious about the median property tax paid that you quoted. That was from the Taxpayers Foundation?
That's from the Tax Foundation, Washington, D.C.
Tax Foundation.
Foundation.
Did they state whether the states that have those median property taxes also have state income tax or sales tax?
Yeah, as a matter of fact,
local or state?
Right, and there's a good example, like in Hawaii. Basically, in Anchorage, the property homeowners here pay about 4% of their income to property taxes. In the Big Island, Hawaii, it's 1%, even though the state revenues, including sales and property tax in Hawaii, are 170% lower than they are in Alaska. So it's not a matter of if there's enough money available. There's plenty of money available. It's deciding on what the role of government is.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Assembly members? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. We'll get to everybody here, so you don't need to stand in line. You're going to get tired. Please.
Hi, Rob Timmons with Municipal Taxpayers League. It's great to see you all here today. What we're dealing with here is establishing the base amount for the next year's tax collection, which is what worked for the past 20 years and has been misinterpreted, we feel, in the last few years, in that they're trying to collect at the cap as opposed to what was actually collected. So the base, which is what this language of the TPA, or Taxpayer Protection Act, is trying to allow the voting public to vote on in April, is where are we going to establish that base? And we think that it should be on what was actually collected as a base, as opposed to what could have been collected, which is the tax cap. And this year, for example, it was $11 million under the cap that was collected. So therefore, next year, we should start that base at that $11 million under the cap, and then add those CPI, new construction, population growth, and so forth to that number. If we don't do that, we will establish, after 4 or 5 years of this, a huge gap that could be exploited and really hurt the taxpayer, hurt the families of Alaska, and hurt those people who are property owners and being able to support their families. I would submit that the responsible thing to do is control spending, as opposed to having this cap raised so high every year, and after a few years become unsustainable. I would like to also ask the administration what their opinion is on the impact for city government, and what their calculation is on the impact for our families here in the Anchorage area. So I believe that what we need here is not more expensive government, but we need to control the spending control raising the taxes and keeping our cap from exploding or rising too rapidly. And with the establishing this language here, the base, then it will grow at a more sustainable, lower rate and provide for a much more stable living environment here in Alaska, or in Anchorage. So if I may, I'd like to ask the administration what they think.
Normally, when people testify, sir, you've got comments for us, and if we have questions, we'll go back, but it's not between you and the administration.
Very good. So I would highly encourage you to allow for the democratic process to continue and to allow the voting public to decide at the ballot box that the original intent, what the original intent was for this language, and that it worked for 20 years. I believe that was the right thing to do, the responsible thing to do, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have a couple of questions. Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you. I got to admit, this is the weirdest thing I've seen in a while. You said that the basis for the tax cap calculation has been misinterpreted. I've never seen it interpreted any other way than what the language of this ballot proposition says it ought to be. I've never seen it calculated ever in any other way than what this ballot measure says it ought to be, and I've never heard anyone suggest that it should be done differently. So I'm kind of curious as to what the problem is that needs to be fixed.
Okay, you've never heard of anyone wanting to collect to the cap?
Well, that's not what this is. The basis of the tax cap is the amount of taxes collected, actually collected in the previous year, right? That's what this ballot measure would set in stone, but it's my understanding it already is set in stone.
Well, I would hope it was. It worked for 20 years, but I understand that there's a certain amount of tax that is allowable to be collected each year from any source, property tax, cigarette tax, whatever taxes. That establishes the maximum amount that that you can extract from the taxpayer. But if you choose to work with, say, $11 million under that, then that leaves that gap. Mm-hmm. And that then would be the base, according to this new language.
But that's the base as it is now. That's the current practice as it is now. This doesn't change anything.
Well, it's my understanding that there are those that believe that's not the case, and so it needs some clarification. And that's all this is just clarification.
I've never heard anyone. I apologize because this is kind of odd because it's like, well, we should set it in stone to do it the way it's always been done and the way we have to do it. I'm not aware that we actually have a choice, but to do it the way you're suggesting.
Okay, then to me, then it would seem to be a fairly easy sell to vote for this, to allow the public to add that clarification language, and everybody's happy.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for this gentleman? Thank you for coming forward.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Anybody else wishing to testify, please come forward.
Hi, Neil Nichols, Nichols. I'm here to ask you to allow democracy to work. We're not talking about whether you folks like the Taxpayer Protection Act or not and want to ratify it tonight. All we're talking about is whether or not you're going to allow the Anchorage voters to vote on it. So that's all I'm asking tonight. I don't want to get into any technical discussion about the TPA. Although I do understand it, I do agree with what Rob Timmons just said about the base having been used, or actual taxes rather, having been used as next year's base for beginning to calculate how much taxes can increase, and instead when Mark Begich took office in 2003, we suddenly switched from using last year's actual taxes collected to the cap as next year's base for beginning to calculate taxes. So without heading down that road, I just wanted to keep the message simple. and ask you folks to please allow Anchorage voters to vote on this in April. Any questions?
Any questions from Assembly members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I apologize.
Harris, I didn't see your light up.
I didn't. Is it your understanding that this would prevent us from taxing to the cap?
No. It is how the cap is calculated each year. It's not whether or not you have the authority to tax to the cap. It's how the cap is calculated.
Okay. That's where my confusion is, because this doesn't change how the cap is calculated.
Well,
if we tax
it does.
to the cap, then that's the basis for next year's taxes. If we don't tax to the cap, then that's the basis for next year's taxes. And this doesn't change that. That's why I'm so confused.
Well, no, you're right in that there should be no question. The language is plain and simple. Under 1403, it says the total amount of municipal tax that can be levied during a fiscal year shall not exceed the total amount approved by the Assembly for the preceding year.
Right.
What that amount is what's in question. A more liberal interpretation of that would be that the amount approved by the Assembly, well, was that amount the actual taxes levied last year, or was that amount the maximum amount of taxes that could have been levied? And what has been going on is they've been using the amount that could have been levied as the basis for beginning how much they can increase taxes for next year. Not the amount that was levied, it's the amount that could have been legally levied up to the limit.
That's interesting, because I've never actually seen that. But if that's the case, I'd like to see it.
Talk to the city manager. I'm sure they'll clarify that.
Thank you.
And it is the detriment not only to property owners but also to government itself is this growing margin between the actual taxes collected and then this cap. Presently we're seeing maybe an $11, $12 million margin between those two figures, but year over year, if this Taxpayer Protection Act is not enacted, that amount could grow in 4 years, conservative studies show, to an amount exceeding $40 million. And so if we have Mayor Thrifty now, and then suddenly, let's say 5 years from now, we have Mayor Spendy come in, to use a friend's terminology, and suddenly they may have $40 or $50 million more of taxing authority in 1 year, and they could go right to that amount, and you suddenly could see your property taxes jump, 20% in 1 year. That's what we're trying to prevent.
Anything else, Mike?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for coming out this evening. And I think I heard you say that it's pretty clear. It's clear right in the charter, okay, what the process is, but it's also clear in the code 12.25. So what do you think about, instead of creating a ballot proposition, that costs money, okay, making a revision to the code to make it even more clearer? I mean, I think it's clear enough right now, but what do you think about that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think that'd be great. Anything we can do to save money, and yes, those ballot measures are expensive. I personally would like to see it go to a ballot just to see what the voters think. I don't necessarily think that it is up to this distinguished panel. I think it is an issue that should be put before the voters, and I think people do get it. They can understand the concept that we've tried to explain tonight. And it's interesting, Elvie. My dad he's an retired English professor. My sister teaches English in high school in California, and my wife's father-in-law is an attorney. And so we passed this by him and said, "How do you read this?" And in all three cases, they read it as the base should be last year's actual taxes collected, if you read this, not the cap. Yet, however, and by the way, from the inception of the tax cap up until 2003, that is how it was done, because there was no question. It seemed like, the process leaped out of the text here without question. However, in 2003, things were suddenly done differently, and we started using the cap as the basis for calculating how much we could increase taxes the following year. And it was just a method to get more money. And I can understand on the government side of things, protecting the city's ability to collect revenue is not a bad thing in some regards. But when we're talking about the spirit of this tax increase control measure, I don't think there's anybody in this room that would disagree that there can be no tax without control on that tax. There has to be some control on how much these expenses, which have serious impact in people's lives. They have an impact on their ability to stay in their homes, on their household finances, on planning for retirement, future, and so forth. That taxes on those vital assets need to come with necessary controls, and they shouldn't be played with, and there shouldn't be parsing of words. That the language should be plain and clear. And I think that Chris's insertion of this clarification is really necessary at this point.
Anything else, Elby?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There are no other questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Welcome to the meeting, sir.
Harry Young, Eagle River, Y-O-U-N-G. And I'm just seconding what's been said already. I think I'm a retiree. I retired a couple years ago. I work a little bit now, but I watched my property taxes almost double in the period before I retired, and came to the conclusion that if it happened, if it went up at that rate, I would have to sell and have to leave. And I have a neighbor who is, in fact, doing that. He's in the process of building a house outside the borough and moving out. His house that he built himself is quite nice. I mean, it's awe-inspiring. But he likes it more than he does now. So, in the interest of clarity, I think it would be a good thing to just put this out. We've had a number of instances, the Begich administration, and where it appeared that the rules were jiggled. They were gamed, and I lost trust. Just put it very honest, a little less. I'm lacking in trust. I'd like to see things made clear, crystal clear, locked in cement, and then everybody knows what the rules are. When you change the rules in the middle of a game, can you imagine the Olympics were handled the way this last vote was, this last senatorial election? You start down the luge run and they change the rules 3 times before you get to the end. And that's where I think this is important. We need to just put this very clearly so that we know we're taxing from the previous year's revenues, not what they could have collected. And at that point, I think Mr. Gutierrez has it right on. I'm not arguing in the least. I mean, it's crystal clear in his mind. It was crystal clear in my mind, but after talking to the people, it's not crystal clear. So that's what I'd like to see is just clarity. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming to testify. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. My name is Jason Rampton from Eagle River.
Your last name for the record.
Rampton, R-A-M-P-T-O-N.
Thank you, sir.
I would speak in support of having this Taxpayer Protection Act placed on the ballot. I and my wife have lived in Eagle River for over 25 years. We have kind of a 5-year plan that we've set up for ourselves. We'd like to retire within about a 5-year point from now. We've looked at our property taxes that have gone up and up and up. So it's almost like a exponential increase in our taxes. We built a nice home. I feel sometimes like I feel kind of like the little red hen. I brought the book to show you. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen it before. My kids, we've had this in our family for 30 years. I've read it to all of my kids for since they were little. And my parents read it to me, and my grandparents read it to them. We were planning, my wife and I, what we were going to do in our retirement, and our 5-year plan is to retire. But as our taxes have gone up, as we've worked, as we've been, we feel like the little red hen. We work and we work and we plan and we save and we put aside, and we build that home the way we want it, the way we like it, and as we're building it, the government's looking at that house, and they're taxing it, and every year they're taxing it more and more and more, it seems. Currently, right now, because we have some property, some land attached to our property, we're paying around $14,000 a year in property taxes. And I look at that, I think, how are we ever going to afford to retire? I mean, that's like having a mortgage and without even owing anything on the house. And I see that, and I think, we can't retire and keep the house. And I'm concerned about it. And I applaud Mayor Sullivan. He has done a great job. I just take my hat off to him and everything he's done to operate the budget under the circumstances that he's had to operate under with the obligations that he's had to fulfill. But I would encourage you as a body to approve this act, to allow us to have this put on the ballot and to let the people choose. And I think that they will choose property. They will choose properly. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer questions.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from assembly members? Thank you, sir. There are no questions.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the meeting, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. My name's Bob Mayer. First, I choose to speak to process here tonight, and I would like to
Spell your
thank...
last name for the record.
Huh?
Could you spell your last name for the record?
M-A-I-E-R.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Well, first, I'd like to thank Assemblymember Birch for the process, choosing the process of taking this to a vote of the people. The last time there was an issue concerning the tax cap before the institution of the Anchorage Assembly here was December 2nd, 2003, 160, when ordinance number AO 2003-160 was passed by the Anchorage Assembly. And ironically, it was signed into law by Chair Trainee and current Chair Trainee. What that ordinance did, it removed the muses from the voter-approved tax cap and also recalculated the MUSA formula for the AWW ratepayers, still an ongoing issue. That issue probably should have gone to a vote of the people, since the tax cap was created by the people, but it did eventually end up going to a vote of the people for a citizens ballot initiative, Proposition 9, on the April 2009 ballot, which passed by a 62% vote of the people. Now, that's what's called a supermajority. I think you all have your issues, and you'd all like to get a 62% vote of the people. I believe the people have probably already spoken on this. They want integrity when it comes to the repair, the clarification, the intent of their tax cap. All I can do is to urge you to listen to that 62% vote of the people and approve what is before you here tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions from assembly members? Thank you for being here, sir. Anybody else wish to testify? Isn't it easier than standing in line? We'll get to all of you. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Bethany Markham, M-A-R-C-U-M. I think that we're having this discussion at all points out the fact that there evidently needs to be more clarity in the wording. If it can be interpreted in more ways than one, then there's no reason not to clarify it. I think that the way that Assemblymember Birch has it written out in the memorandum that I read here makes it explicitly clear to me the two different ways that it could be interpreted, and there's no reason that the people should be shut out from the process of making the determination about what that the definition of that cap should be. So I would encourage you to allow Assemblymember Birch's ordinance to go through and give the people a chance to have their say on this.
Questions from assembly members? Thank you, ma'am, for waiting to testify. I appreciate it. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward.
Hi, Cindy Hite, H-I-T-E. And as someone who doesn't like public speaking, I'm going to tell you guys this is a very intimidating situation. So I think you guys should all come on this side, and I should go up there.
Not a problem. I was hoping they would lower this and raise that.
I'd love it. So I've been in the assembly meetings for several years, and I always watch people come up here and testify, and I don't do it. I hear people asking for, their services not to be cut. And so I'm here tonight to ask for my ability to give services to my family not to be cut. People who are retired, who are looking at having to sell their homes because they can't live in a home they've bought and they've paid for their entire lives, but they can't afford the taxes. Not being able to give your kids braces, not being able to buy food. Because we keep getting taxed higher and higher, and we cannot provide services for our family or our community. I mean, my time and energy to donate to the charities and the donations I like to donate to and spend time in are being minimized as I take on 2 jobs to hopefully hold on to my home. So there's a lot of people out there that are just on the cusp of being able to provide for their families. And I think this always looks like you're basically saying, we can decide better than you how to spend the money in this community and for your family than you can as the taxpayer, as the person, the people in this city. So I thank Mr. Birch for putting this out there. I agree with everybody out here. Clarity is always a very good thing. Things are very murky these days. And I would please request that you guys put this out as a ballot measure for the people of Anchorage to vote on. Also, since I'm up here and I might never do this again, thank you. Mayor Sullivan, you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Any questions?
There are no questions. Anybody else wishing to testify on this issue, please come forward. Anyone at all? Come on down.
My name is Don Smith, SMITH. I came tonight to apologize to everyone for apparently not writing clearly enough when I drafted this document 28 years ago. I thought I was pretty clear when I'm not an attorney, but I thought that I had written a fairly clear idea that you take last year's budget and you can't increase it more than population and consumer price index in order to hold the line on budgets over these years. And I know there's been a few little games played, but for the most part, I think the concept that I had when I wrote this has held firm. I don't have a problem with the vote, but my only concern would be if the public didn't understand this. It seems fairly straightforward, but if for some reason they voted no, would that be a caveat to say, well, there's some change needed in the way we're calculating it? But I think the language is pretty simple. I think that it's, you can't take last year's budget and go any higher than what that amount would generate plus that consumer price index and population. But this might clarify and make everybody happy. I'd support it. Thank you.
We have some questions, Don. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I appreciate you being here, and I agreed with you. I thought it was pretty clear. It is a little complex, a calculation, but it's clear. I had a conversation with Ms. Osiander, and the mayor jotted down the same thing to me, and this is what I think maybe some of the people who testified before weren't articulating that I didn't get. One of the things that had happened in the past was that the previous administration counted state revenue sharing as tax revenue collected because it was used to offset property taxes. And that, am I getting that kind of right? Debbie's shaking her head. And so that, in a sense, artificially inflated the cap. Are you aware of that? Can you speak to that for a moment? Because I think that is certainly a legitimate concern. Well, go ahead.
Well, I've tried to follow, obviously, this issue, since back in 1984 when it first came into effect. And I knew there were some interpretations being made but to be honest, I wasn't on board the assembly. I don't have a legal background, and frankly, I wasn't picking up on some of the little subtle changes that were being interpreted. I've got a chart in my briefcase. I keep track of the budgets every year since 1971, and who was mayor, and just kind of see how things are are being calculated, but I didn't pick up on that, to be real honest. I had faith that it was clear enough, people were going to follow it, like from the day it first started. Some of these little ways that you come up with possibly changing it, I wasn't even familiar were happening until I heard about this, and then I kind of got alarmed to think that, my goodness, I have a real problem, for example, with bonds that include operating expenses for the length of a fire truck or whatever, because I think that's a way to get around the tax cap. And the draconian plan that I had when I wrote this, I was anticipating, frankly, that if Uncle Sugar decided to give you $100 million one year for one reason or another, that had to be calculated into the tax cap, that you couldn't, if the state gave you a bunch of money, it would lower the property taxes for the general public. And I've never screamed about that, because when I went back and reread what I wrote, why, it's pretty clear, I think, that that wouldn't happen that way. But frankly, that's what I had in mind. I figured if the state wanted to give us $300 million a year, we maybe could have no taxes at all in Anchorage, because we'd have enough to take care of the local share. But if this needs to be clarified, I don't have a problem. My only concern would be if the public said no, then have you got some weird twist that they're going to use that as a way to say they really don't support it?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I do appreciate you being here and enlightening us on the cap, and it works. It's worked very well, and not many of us can say at the end of the day that we did something that impactful that lasted that long, but you did.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that the tax cap's on the book, because I think it has saved taxpayers a huge amount of money had it not been there. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. There are no further questions. Anybody else wish to testify in this matter? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body? It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Honeman. Actually, Mr. Birch, you want to start as the mover?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This clarification issue is basically, it gives us an opportunity to remedy what we've talked about around the edges here, and that's the fact that we have had an increase in the amount of taxes that can be leveled in town based on some of the revenue sharing that has come to the city, and what that's done is inflated on a year-over-year basis beyond what had happened over the prior 20 years. So I think this is, like I say, some might refer to it as a housekeeping item. I think it's more important than that. I think what we're really dealing with here is public trust and integrity, and I think what we have a duty and a responsibility to allow the public an opportunity to vote on this and basically restore a key provision of that cap, and that's the fact that the amount that was collected in the prior year in property taxes in the community is in fact the number that's brought forward, and I'd urge approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birch. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the issue with the state revenue sharing that Ms. Osiander raised and that the mayor jotted down for me. What I don't see anywhere in here is anything that would prohibit a future mayor from doing the same thing. Now, if we wanted a ballot measure that said state revenue sharing for the purposes of tax cap calculation may not be counted as tax revenue collected, and therefore keep it from pushing the tax cap up in future years, that would make sense. But there's nothing in here that would actually prevent any mayor, the current mayor, a future mayor, a mayor 50 years from now, from doing that. So I guess I don't see the reason. We're going to maintain the status quo with regard to how the tax cap is calculated. I don't know. It seems like we're setting in stone something that's already set in stone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. Paul? Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And ordinarily, I'm very much in favor of letting the public speak on trying to clarify things that may seem to be unclear. I'm not so sure that this is one of those areas, but I think Mr. Smith actually hit it on his kind of on the head there. And that he says, I guess, and I agree with him. I guess if it needs clarifying, perhaps, but one of the things that I think we earlier addressed in this unfunded mandates, it's an ask. It's going to the legislature to ask for the state to pay back, or if you will, fund the mandates by mandatorily by statutes define the exemptions that local communities shall give. Not may, not can, shall. And there's nothing that we can do as a local community to ensure that the state or its legislature will give 100% of the, I should say, refund the unfunded or fund the mandates, statutes on a year-to-year basis. And as we learned, I guess, as a community in 82, 83, when they did pay almost 100% of those costs, and it declined over about a decade's period, and from about 92, 93, we haven't received a penny to offset any of these mandates. And so I'm very concerned that what we may be doing is, the intent here to me would be, yes, the monies that I would see would come back to property taxpayer relief. And the numbers that I have, and again, it's very unclear because it's outdated material, somewhere in the neighborhood about 20% property taxpayer. That's real relief. And that's without doing any other revenue sources. And so it's huge. I think we need to all get behind our legislators, the Anchorage contingent anyway, and I mean, this would benefit statewide, actually, but the Anchorage contingent is 40. I mean, we have the majority, and if they would all vote to fund those mandates, I think we'd benefit greatly, to more importantly and more impactful than any change here that we see. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually had the same understanding that Mr. Gutierrez did, and had a couple of exchanges with the Department of Law. So, Mr. Wheeler, based on our email conversation, would you like to clarify what would happen if, in the specific example of state municipal assistance, if this were to be on the books?
Through the chair, assembly members, it's not necessarily so much the source of that revenue, state, federal, whatever it might be. It's the way it's used in the tax cap calculation. And you end up with two numbers. You have the allowed tax cap number, and you have the amount to be collected. In some years, those numbers are the same if you choose to tax the cap. In other years, they may be different. In the examples that we're thinking of where the credit is put in between those two numbers, what has happened is the amount allowed, instead of the amount to be collected, has been used in the next year. So the greater number is carried over into the next year instead of the lower number, which is the amount to be collected. What this proposition does is it says that amount to be collected is the number that's carried over, the lower number. So if you take revenue and apply it as a credit in the property tax calculations, that lower number is the one that's going to be carried over pursuant to this proposition. In the past, you could have done it either way. Okay? This clarifies that you would do it the one way. You carry over the low number. What happens year to year is it lessens what we'd call in the utility industry the rate shock effect, right? Because it would lower that number going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. So to summarize what he said, for those of you who weren't listening, the practice of the prior administration of using state dollars after the mill levy was set would no longer be allowed. The current practice, the practice of the current administration, where you apply those dollars as part of the tax base, would be carried forward in perpetuity if this were to pass. And that's my problem with this. We have several enterprise funds, enterprise activities in this community. I speak specifically of ML&P. You read the paper last week. All the rail belt utilities except ML&P are forming the brother of Gretzky, I think. They're coming together. And ultimately, all of our electrical utilities in the rail belt should be one entity. When that happens, I hope it does, we, the city, should benefit by selling our assets, ML&P, to that entity. And that will be a windfall to the city. If the Assembly at that time wants to share some of that windfall with taxpayers by reducing their property taxes, they can't do it unless they're willing to make a commensurate cut the following year. And I'm not willing to tie the hand to the Assembly of the future like that. So I'm not going to vote for this, not because it's not a good idea conceptually, but I believe fundamentally it's already in place, and I don't want to prevent us from being able to provide tax relief in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Starr, sir.
Well, all due respect to Mr. Flynn, that's not the question we should answer. I think that's the question that the voters should answer. That's what I think as representatives we do. We put those questions forth. They're big enough. And I think and that's not to be disrespectful to your opinion of whether we should or not, but I think it's clear enough packaged as Mr. Birch brought it forward to put it in front of the voters. So in that aspect, I also think that inadvertently, perhaps, Mr. Honeman articulated why, in fact, we need to do this. I think you were trying to justify that it was not a practice necessary, but I've seen it work both ways, and it's very, very unclear when you put above the line and below the line. And is it or was it malicious? I don't know. It sure fooled me the first time I saw it happen. And then what happened was it carried forward to the next year and again, kept resetting that bar higher and higher and higher from the taxable authority. What it does do for me is it clearly states to the use of the monies that we get. And to me, that's important. I'd like the voters to have a chance to understand that, and so that we do it the same every year, and the basis is set for that. So as that revenue sharing comes into play, there shouldn't be a question. It should go directly back to the voters. I think this language clarity that Mr. Birch has put together does that. I think the voters need a chance to understand it. And they got it with Prop 9. It was a complicated MISA-MUSA thing. I've said that'll never be understood. I think they got it. And I think they're going to get this one with some education. I think it's good time for the voters to set policy, and that's what they do. It leaves the policy question to them. It sets it, and year after year it's going to be the same. So that's all. I'm in support of it. Thank you.
Mayor Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple quick comments in response to Mr. Flynn. Your example of selling utilities, when we sell a utility, the proceeds go into the municipal trust fund. You don't have the option of using it for tax relief. So if that was your concern, then I hope that alleviates that.
I'll briefly note a significant legal settlement would not be subject to that restriction.
No. And again, I mean, the purpose, though, is, as Mr. Wheeler explained, is regardless of the source of the funds, if some of it is applied to tax relief and you actually collect less taxes that year, the lesser amount that you collected is the basis for calculating the tax cap the next year, which is the way the practice was for over 20 years. And there was a legal opinion in the mid-2000s that said, well, if we calculate a mill levy up to the tax cap and we apply revenue sharing or any other source to it, next year we won't start with that amount of what we actually collected. We'll start with the amount we could have collected, and that has added $76 million to the taxpayers' costs just over that few-year period. So it's insidious. It's actually not the intent of what the tax cap was when it was formed or how it was actually utilized for 20 years. And we've gone back to the original methodology because that was the intent of the sponsors that passed it.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Honeman?
Yeah, and I think I kind of hearing the conversation around me, and I think I've grasped it pretty well, so I appreciate Mr. Starr's comments. And again, I go back to this unfunded mandates, and we're asking as a body, and I intend to bring a resolution for this body to also follow up with that, and that is, if 1 year we get the benevolence of, or the appropriation from the Anchorage contingent that passes and sustains any potential veto by the governor, let's say we get a 20% reduction in our property taxes because the money is funded by the state, but the following year they're having some difficulties financially and can't give us those same percentage of monies or dollars, then we're really going to be struggling if this definition applies strictly as Mr. Flynn has pointed out. And I think that we hamstring not only this future assemblies, but future previous or future, current or future administration. So I'm a little uncomfortable from that perspective and scenario, and I agree that there are some concerns, but I think that has to do with the voters speak. If they don't approve of what's going on, I think they speak very clearly. So, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Jackson? Elvie. I'm sorry, I didn't use Elvie Gray Jackson. I used Jackson. Sorry, Elvie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I knew you by that name, too.
First off, the tax cap is really complicated. Very, very complicated. It took me many, many years to understand it, and I think I have a pretty good understanding of it right now. But a lot of people really don't. And besides folks feeling that the calculation in terms of what number you start with in the preceding year is not really clear, there's a whole lot of issues not in the code and the charter that aren't really clear to a lot of folks in this community. And frankly, I don't think that this language here that is proposed to be put before the voters is very helpful. I don't think that people are going to really understand what it is they're voting on anyway, and that's one of the reasons why I mentioned, how about saving a little money and not doing a ballot proposition and maybe starting at the code level in 1225 and making some revisions there if the goal really is to provide clarity to our citizens. Nobody wants to do that more than I do, but I really don't think that this is the way to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Gutierrez, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for queuing in twice, but I have a question that popped in my head. We postponed an item earlier. What happens if the voters approve a sales tax? This says the base amount for calculating next year's tax increase limit shall be the amount of property taxes to be collected in the current year. If we also then, if we also then implement a sales tax that is intended to be a dollar-for-dollar offset of property taxes, what does that do?
Dennis?
Mr. Chairman, how much time do I get?
We have until 11, Mr. Wheeler.
We can say later than that, too.
Seriously, I would like a few minutes to digest that.
Mr. Chair?
Ma'am?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, while Mr. Wheeler is cogitating.
We can give you an initial response from the Budget Director, if you'd like.
That's fine.
Go ahead.
Okay, sure. Let's say that we were going to collect $50 million in sales taxes in a year. It would supplant $50 million in property taxes because you calculate the amount allowed under the tax cap, the higher number, and then you offset it with all the other taxes that we collect. So you do minuses. So you have a number. And then you get down to the amount of property taxes that are allowed. Okay? And then how much you need to support your budget is the amount to be collected. So it's one of the deductions we take from the total amount.
So then the next year's tax cap would be $50 million less than it would have been had we not had the sales tax.
Correct. Because the tax cap is intended to limit the amount that taxes can increase from one year to the next.
Holy Hannah, because then if we do that again the next year, the tax...
But presumably, your sales tax are revenues that will continue from one year to the next.
Right.
So
but
they're
you're
not
going to continue to lower the
item.
cap, and you're not going to continue to increase sales taxes, right, unless you keep increasing the rate.
But then if you have $45 million in sales taxes that next year, then you would collect $5 million more in property taxes, if the math works.
No, you would collect $45 million less in property taxes than you would have otherwise.
Okay. Depending on how the math works, but you set the maximum of all taxes that can be collected. It's a limit on all taxes, not just property taxes.
Mr. Chairman.
So,
Mike?
I'm sure Mr. Wheeler will want to chime in eventually, and I will allow him to do that, because I asked him the question.
I'd like to move on to Harriet, if you'd like.
The point is, we're going to be looking in a little bit at a proposed ballot measure that we're going to put before voters, if it should be approved tonight, that Mr. Flynn and others have been working on for more than a year. This seems to have kind of hit us out of the blue, and there are a lot of unanswered questions. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Harriet?
Thank you, Mr.
On this
Chair.
issue?
On this issue, when is the final date for this body to act on anything that's going to be on the ballot on April 5th?
February 1st.
Okay. May I respectfully request that we put off this action either till next week or until February 1st, have a work session. I think it's pretty difficult to have this kind of discussion on the fly with this complex math. I think the administration would appreciate some time to go through all the ramifications of this change. And if anybody has any ideas about, suppose we sell the electric utility, all of those kinds of things need to figure into this. I've heard all kinds of good ideas here tonight that could seriously impact the fiscal security of this city's finances in the future if they were to come to pass. I just heard something about the sales tax collection that didn't make any sense at all. And if sales taxes suppose we were to institute a sales tax, and then we had the economy fall out from under us like it did a couple of years ago, and the sales tax revenue bottoms out, then we're really going to be in a pickle, because there will be no way to have a predictable flow of funds. And I think that's what everybody here is trying to accomplish, is a predictable, steady, whether it grows or not is irrelevant. That really depends on the economy. But I would like to postpone this decision, get educated, go through all the possibilities, and then make the decision.
Let me move to Chris, because it's Chris's issue.
Yeah, well, this has actually been in front of the body since the middle of December, so it's not, I would quibble over, kind of being sprung on everybody. But I think from the standpoint of familiarity that we all have with the tax cap, is I think we all understand, that what the objective is, and the objective is to limit the impact that we have on property taxpayers, and that impact has been significant. I think what we need to do is we need to focus on the very simple, very direct language that is prepared here with the assistance and the support of the Department of Law. And it does direct to a concern that I've had voiced to me and that we hear every year at budget time, and that's how, if we've got a property tax cap, why are we seeing this explosive growth? And I think one of the remedies is this particular language, in that it will provide the type of clarity that's really needed to restore public confidence in our tax cap calculation. I think, all the other, everything around the edges, again, on the calculation side, the way it rolls up is that sales tax is an offset. So it is, so if you have a sales tax revenue, that offsets a certain amount of property tax. But it's the base calculation that has been compromised, in my view, and has been modified from the way it was interpreted for the first 20 years we had the tax cap. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Elvie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Burge, thank you for bringing this forward. And it has been around for a while, but it was introduced on the 14th of December, and we haven't met since then until tonight. And we don't have many work sessions in between. And there have been a lot of concerns that have been raised this evening that I would really like some answers to before I make a decision on how I am going to vote on this. Because, as I said earlier, it's very, very important that the public understand what we do, understand a lot of issues a lot better than probably some of us do. But I really believe that to have a little more time, especially considering the fact that we do have the time, if this is to put this on the ballot, why not take that opportunity? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm about to call for the vote on this because we only addressed an issue twice, and we're going to be circling ourselves for a while. Mr. Starr, it's your second time up to the ballot, sir.
It is, and as Chairman of Budget and Finance Committee, and Ms. Gray Jackson, we did schedule it. This body's taken action, which was to send it to our committee and have discussion about it. And again, my policy inside committee, as you know as a member, isn't to put people on the spot inside that committee and take a vote. I remember the dialogue which we had, and we had Mr. Birch adjunct to our committee to talk about it. We did meet on the topic as a Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Your question and your primary concern was how to address the service areas, and how did that play into that? If you remember, your struggling question was to Ms. Frasca was how do the service areas apply, and that was basically it. We had some favorable speak. I won't say that we took a vote and moved it out of committee, but we had very, very little in the 1 hour session that we scheduled on this topic, much debate. And I think that it does meet the muster of our committee to move it out with a favorable recommendation. That said, the other opportunity is for a voter initiative, and the longer we delay, I think if the folks that are so moved to go out and get signatures and force it on the ballot because we can't buck up and let them decide at the ballot box, we take that away if we delay tonight. So I want to remind that we did take action. We sent it to committee. It's been to our committee, and we pulled it out, and here it is. Thank you.
Elvie,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, just really briefly, I want to thank you, Mr. Starr, for reminding me that we did have a committee meeting, and we did. And I didn't bring up the service area question. It doesn't matter who did, But there were some questions that I had, and there was a little bit of homework that I was supposed to provide, except I didn't have time to do it. And I apologize for that, but I'm firm on the fact that we really need to have a little bit more time on this subject before we vote to put it before the voters. There are some very serious concerns that have been brought up this evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Dennis, do you have any words for us before I bring in the vote up? Because we're not going to chase each other around for a couple of hours on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything, Dennis?
Assembly members, I concur with the opinion of the OMB director that there is an offset between the sales tax and the property tax.
Okay.
May I, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Dennis, it reads as follows. The base amount for calculating the next year's tax increase limit shall be the amount of property taxes to be collected in the current year. If you had a 60% property tax base and a 40% sales tax base, and your basis is property taxes collected, then it seems to me your increase would be limited to that 60% of property tax.
That's what it's reading.
I didn't go to law school, but I did just study a lot of words.
Through the chair, Assemblymember Flynn, as the OMB director indicated, part of the calculation includes backing out all that non-property tax sources of funds, which would include a sales tax.
Okay. Please vote.
On the motion to postpone or the?
No, this is the motion on the item in front of us, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
You can't vote on this one, sir.
No, I thought that somebody made a
No.
motion to postpone until a date certain. I thought Harry.
This is the motion to approve that's on the floor. We never had the motion to postpone.
It was a suggestion.
It was a suggestion. It was not a motion. It was not seconded. We're voting on the main issue in front of us, Chris.
Then I'll move to postpone to the next meeting or the meeting after that.
Let me stop it for a minute. I'm going to reset it, Barbara. Send it back. Just take a second. We back there? Okay. Your motion, Harriet's to do what?
Postpone the decision on this item until either the next meeting, which is, was that January 18th?
Why don't you just make it motion
or
postponed
the
to
next
February
meeting.
1st, so we can have a work session between now and then. February 1st is the last time to push this to the ballot. Okay. What?
I'm sorry, the wrong calendar is up here.
Would be February 1st, I think, is the first meeting. Julia?
I'm sorry, I don't have the clerk's calendar in front of me, but my recollection is that the last day for introduction and action, is it introduction or action? It's okay? I mean, I'll defer to the clerk's office.
She tells me
because
it's okay, February the 1st. Yes. My intention is to have a work session, 2-hour work session if we have to, so we can delineate exactly what this does, what it doesn't do, rather than trying to do it on the fly. And if that's your motion, Harriet, if I need a second for it, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Move to postpone to the meeting of February 1st.
Second.
We moved and seconded.
Oh, sorry.
Who was the second? Was that you, Paul?
I did.
Okay.
I can't get
Madam
it up.
Clerk, please reset this if you would. Okay, thank you. On the motion to postpone, Chris?
Well, I can count noses. It takes 8 to put it on the ballot, and does not appear to be 8 here. And if it's necessary to go through a work session to address some of the concerns that are there, then I would certainly encourage and support that. I think it's paramount that we have that we allow the voters an opportunity to consider this on the April ballot. And again, if the will of the body is to and in fact the schedule will permit that to happen by the 1st of February, or if
The schedule will permit it, and I'll make sure that this comes up on the 1st of February meeting. Sir, will you be here that day?
I've
heard rumors you may be gone.
teleconference.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we'll make arrangements for you to participate
Yep.
then.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you.
On the motion to postpone voting on this to the 1st of February with a work session, please vote. That was unanimous. This will be back in front of us after work session. Madam Clerk, please set a 2-hour work session up between now and then, so we can get all, if some members have questions on this, please get them to the clerk so we can get them answered by the administration. Thank you, Chris. Next item in front of us is item 14F. 14F is an ordinance submitted to the qualified voters of the municipality of Anchorage at a regular election on April 5, 2011, a ballot proposition amending the municipal charter, Article 21, Municipal Vehicle Code, enforcement standards to authorize a limited delegation of downtown parking violation enforcement to a municipal agency or municipal authority only for the downtown area bounded by Ship Creek on the north, Gamble Street on the east, 10th Avenue on the south, and M Street on the west. Public hearing on this item is now open, and there's an S version that comes along with it. So it's on the main issue in front of us and the S version. If you want to testify, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record, spell your last name, especially in your case. I'm used to pink. I think it looks great on you again.
Well, you know, it's a new color. Greetings. My name is Susan Pacillo, Pacillo. I'm an Anchorage resident, also known as the retired but not expired parking fairy. I oppose the return of the parking authority. Big surprise there. I first stood before this assembly over 15 years ago. And once again, we're having this conversation, only tonight, my sister's here in spirit. I have new wings, and I couldn't squeeze into my old tutu without Spanx. But in 1997 and 2006, the people said no parking authority. In 2011, I believe the people would also say no parking authority. The people want and deserve fair and impartial enforcement. The people comply with fair and impartial treatment, and we cannot have fair and impartial enforcement when it is being provided by a business. Businesses exist to make money. They need to feed their machine. Parking is a revenue-generating machine. Please don't insult the people of Anchorage by giving one excuse after another as to why a small group of people want to return enforcement of parking to the parking authority. Just tell the truth. It's revenue generation. It's a way to pay for their ever-growing needs. Times are tight, and once again, the city is looking for ways to generate revenue. Downtown parking was a cash cow. It is in every city outside. We need police downtown. Police officers have the authority to be fair and impartial. Underpaid minions required to meet a quota in order to keep their job are not fair and impartial. Proposed ordinance is for a specific area downtown, but myself and many others feel it's just a way for the parking authority to get their foot back in the door. Just like with the TSA, you give them an inch, give them a little power, the next thing you know, they're groping you. It took many years and a lot of work by a lot of people to rein in the last group gone wild. I hear from some, we should not pay high-dollar officers to write tickets when we don't have enough police to fight big crimes. And I also hear there's not enough parking enforcement downtown right now. To this I say, keep our 2 officers downtown. They're a wonderful presence. We need a police presence downtown. They're non-essential personnel designated to parking enforcement. If you take those 2 positions away, that's 2 officers not downtown. They won't be transferred somewhere else. We can't afford to lose any more officers. Bring the rookies back. The rookies stopped 2 robberies without guns. They learned valuable skills before they went to academy, and it weeded out the ones that weren't going to make it through academy before they went to academy, saving the city a lot of money. I've heard there's no money for academy, and we don't want to burden the property owners with higher taxes. Well, then the city needs to start living within its means. I have to, as well as my neighbors, well, the majority of them anyway. And in many areas, the minority abuse the system, and the majority pays for it. Perhaps it's time to start looking at other ways of generating revenue. Let's get creative. There's over 800 tax-exempt properties in the municipality of Anchorage, and some of those institutions have 20-plus tax-exempt properties. Perhaps it's time to look at that. Generating revenue by punishing people downtown is not the answer. We deserve fair and impartial enforcement. I oppose the return of the parking authority. Thank you.
Questions from Assembly members? Come on, you've got a ferry here, so please ask questions. Patrick?
Ms. Pacillo, I just want to say thank you for coming down.
Let's brighten your day.
Yeah, you're actually the glint of light in our evening. Actually, several of them, aren't you? I would just be absolutely as frank as I can. If this were to pass and be enacted, it would be, nothing would delight me more than to see enforcement monies, as in citation dollars, drop. I honestly hope, if it moves forward, that people who use the meters that perhaps are not feeding them as often as they ought to, in fact, do so, and spaces turn over and people are able to find the spots they want downtown, and I'd be delighted if citation dollars dropped. I respect your concerns absolutely, and I can assure you, as I told the ACDA board last week, if this does happen and we do turn it over to them and do a lousy job, we're going to take this back from them. We're not going to tolerate heavy-handed enforcement in our community.
How would you propose taking it back? Do we, the people, have to get the petition process going for 5 years again?
This is permissive, not prescriptive. It doesn't say ACDA gets to do parking enforcement. It says the Assembly may, by ordinance, allow a municipal entity, not a business, a municipal entity, to do parking enforcement. So if they're doing it, and if we pass an ordinance that lets them do that, and they're not doing a good job, we pass an ordinance that takes it back, just like that. No initiative necessary, no petition necessary, simply the Assembly recognizes they're not doing the job. But I, again, appreciate your concerns and your coming down.
Is that it, Pat? Paul?
Yes. Thanks, Ms. Basile, for being here. And I remember your sister walking through. I believe it was pink, if I'm not mistaken. I think Mr. Chamberlain was correct. You look fabulous in purple. And I smile every time I look up at the parking garage with your sister's name on it. And I think it's an excellent monument to memorialize her and her name and her memory for what she's done for the community. And I thank you for that. Having worked with the Anchorage Police Department, my first career position at the department was a community service officer. And we were the immediate classification following the meter maids, which was done by the Anchorage Police Department employees many years ago with the Cushmans, much like the one you guys had one, I believe, parked at the service station over on Tudor for years. And we came into a quandary when this charter amendment came in. I believe Mr. Germark and there was another gentleman. It put before kind of a quandary to the municipality. If we were going to do enforcement for parking violations, it had to be a sworn employee, a sworn officer. So the CSOs, if you will, had to go through state certified and approved training to become what we lovingly refer to as sworn light, not carrying guns, but in sworn in all other ways to enforce laws and write citations, because it affected more than just the parking. It affected a lot of enforcement violations where you issued citations or issued charges. So I believe, Mr. Flynn, I have to agree with them in discussion. I had very much the same concerns that you pointed out. I don't want to see and I think, to correct me if I'm wrong, the term Anchorage Parking Authority is dead, and I'm hopefully gone forever. That this is a whole separate different system, and it is under ordinance if approved by, and we just had some people here testifying how they want to have the opportunity to vote on something. And this one here, to me, smacks right to it. This is not the Assembly making the decision. This is allowing the citizens to say. And I'm with you. I'm really not sure if this were to get approved and go to the ballot that the people would be willing to vote in favor of this. So I'd be surprised. I'm like you. I'd be surprised if it were to succeed and go to the ballot, that it would pass by the vote of the people. I'm not sure that we could get the information out, or that anyone could get the information out to quell those concerns. So again, thank you for bringing up those concerns and for sharing us the information.
Thank you, Paul. Harriet?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much for coming, Ms. Basillo. I appreciate it. Your testimony included a line that I believe you said businesses exist to make money.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? In our work session with the parking, they're not the parking authority, the Alaska Community Development folks and all of those last week and the downtown partnership, it was said that businesses are having trouble making money because the parking meters are not turning over as they should. And I think I was convinced by hearing that. I was also convinced by the fact that the downtown partnership and the businesses downtown who want this to come about were going to take it upon themselves to do a proper voter education campaign so that it would I would not approve this unless I knew somebody was working to that end to make it clear to the voters what it is we're doing. And Mr. Flynn explained it pretty well in that the Assembly does this. All we're doing is giving the Assembly the power to create this and to take it away. So that's and my concern is that the businesses downtown be allowed to make the money that they're paying high rent for to be able to do. So thank you.
Absolutely, and I also believe...
Ms. Gray-Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Pasillo, for being here this evening. Have you seen the S version of the document?
No, I have not.
Because you need to take a look at it, because there's a section, a brand-new section, that very, very clearly outlines what can happen and what can happen. And I really like for you to look at it, and I'd like to hear what your opinion is after taking a moment to read that, if you don't mind, and if the mayor would oblige me. It's just a paragraph. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, you might ask if anyone else wishes to testify, but Ms. Pasillo takes a moment to read.
If you want to, sit down.
I just wanted to say one thing real quick. If the business owners think that there's a problem right now with parking and people not coming downtown because parking's not turning over, which I've been down a lot and I seem to not have any problem finding a place to park, if you put the parking authority back in control, a lot of people won't go back downtown because I fear that it will revert back to what it was before. So,
thank you. Take a look at Section 1, if you would.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to testify on this issue, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one in the public hearing, this testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve. Oh, second.
She can.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move the S version.
You're going to move the S version?
Yes, please.
Second.
And I don't think there's a lot I need to add to the discussion that we've had over the past 14 months on this topic. We've worked hard. Mr. Hall, I really appreciate all your help. Mr. Mayor, I appreciate you dumping this on me. Mr. Wheeler, Ms. Tucker, I think Ms. Westover, who isn't here in absentia, we spent a lot of time on this trying to create something that's very, very narrowly crafted. We've restricted the geographical boundaries. We've restricted the jurisdictional boundaries. We've restricted the numbers of citations that can be enforced. Only parking. Nothing else. This new Section 1 enumerates that even more clearly than we already had. Ms. Pasillo will come down and give us her opinion on Section 1 in a minute here, but if the voters do choose to approve this, I intend to remain very vigilant with ACDA. Rick's here. He'll tell you I sent him a strong email over the weekend about some things that I think need to be handled differently. And frankly, if they do a lousy job, if what was the parking authority is resurrected as the Anchorage Community Development Authority, that will come to an end. That is my pledge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Pasillo, do you look at Section 1?
Yeah, I saw it. It's a little clearer, I mean, as to what they're asking for, and they're not there saying no front plate missing and blah, 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 but I still truly believe that if you give them an inch.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Respect your
Mr.
time.
Honeman?
Yes. First, I just wanted to, I guess for all the things that have already been stated, I won't need to repeat, and I believe Mr. Flynn adequately described
Do you
it.
have any questions for the parking fair?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any questions for her?
Can I go home and have some dinner now?
I do have one last comment, though, real briefly, and I'm sure you can hear it from here. But Chief Mew, I believe at the last discussion we had on this work session, and maybe I don't want to misspeak for Chief Mew, but I believe that one of the concerns I had was if this were to pass and approved, that the two downtown officers, I mean, in years past, again, having worked at the department, we had a foot patrol of at least one officer, oftentimes two, and I know that was an expressed concern and desire of mine, is to make sure that even though those officers wouldn't be necessarily writing citations for parking violations, and that's not being their primary responsibility, but the need to have police officers there to do things such as perform a tow from a car crash or from someone who's in violation of the exceeding how many outstanding violations at a parking meter, things like that, we would still need police, and it would still be desirous. So, Chief, do you have just a minute to maybe address that? I I can't recall exactly what your address on that was.
Mr. Hahnemann, through the chair. We've had discussions with the Assembly at the Public Safety Committee and with the ACDA. A new memorandum of understanding would have to be worked out to make this function, but it's clear to me that under the ordinance, not every enforcement action that occurs downtown will be able to be taken up under the new arrangement if it passes. So there always will be a need for APD presence downtown. Now, I think some of this could be CSOs. We have to work some of that out. We're going to measure what the workload would be and try and cost that out. And preliminary discussions indicate that perhaps the ACDA would be willing to offset some of our costs there, and we could work that into the MOU. The two officers we're talking about that remain downtown, not the recruits, there's no, we have no intent whatsoever to make those positions go away. They were regular patrol positions. We loaned them essentially to the project. We would either leave them there or take them back. But my idea right now is to try and increase downtown foot patrol, and those two positions would let me do that. They could not only help with parking, but they could do the other things we need to do downtown, like address town square, be around the businesses, deal with the tourists, and do a myriad of other things. And they would be available if we could pull this off to help the parking effort as well.
Thank you, Chief. I remember most of what you said, but I didn't want to misspeak for you. Thank you, sir.
We haven't made any final decisions yet, but I think everybody agrees that we could talk in that direction.
Thank you.
Chief, just a quick question since you brought it up. If you have the downtown patrol back there and they're issuing parking tickets, and let's say they see a car that's got expired plates, being a police officer, they could write a ticket for expired plates. Then who does the public get the ticket from, you or the parking authority?
They get it from us, but I think even the parking authority tickets somehow go to, I shouldn't call it parking authority, the ACDA
I know, whatever
tickets.
it is, same thing.
I think they have our name on them, but the ACDA's address. But if we were going to issue the tickets, it's probably just a plain old uniform summons complaint, and it comes from us.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Anything else, Paul? Mike? Thank you, Chief.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't realize I was in the queue. I had no questions.
Okay. Any other questions on this issue before we vote? Debbie, ma'am, I'm sorry.
So it says, "The ordinance shall become effective immediately upon passage and approval of two-thirds vote." My confusion is, it takes that to put it on the ballot. So initially I thought you meant this is the ordinance giving it to the enabling ordinance to give it. But Mr. Gutierrez didn't view it that way. So I just went over, and both of those attorneys looked at each other and said they didn't quite get it either. So can you explain that language?
Well, the reason they don't get it is because they didn't write it.
Are you practicing law again?
No, Rhonda wrote this, and I interpreted it, and they can tell me if I'm right or not, is that the code portions of this, which is the purpose of an intent section,
right,
is effective immediately upon passage by two-thirds of the Assembly, and the charter portion does not take effect until June 1st, if and only if it's approved by voters. So, and what that does is it allows our purpose and intent to be clearly stated to the electorate as they weigh whether they want to approve this change or not.
Then, Mr. Flynn, could you specifically designate to me what section is immediately enabled?
It's only Section 1.
Well, that's not an ordinance, that's an intent statement for the ballot proposition.
Well, if Ms. Westover were here, I'd ask her to clarify, but that's how I interpreted her action when I read it. If you feel it should be removed, I have no hard
I actually asked them if it would be problematic if I deleted it because it was confusing. And they said they needed a little time.
Gee whiz.
So,
No,
Mr. Trainee, would
Ma'am.
it be acceptable to you if we put this at the end of the agenda so they can have...
Absolutely,
a little
ma'am.
How
time?
about like 10 minutes? Come on.
How about an hour? That way you're not hedging your bets. I know you don't want us to leave without taking action. We won't.
Mr. Trainee, could I move that this be placed at the end of the agenda for...
Second.
Second.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any objection to dealing with this before we leave tonight? Okay. This will come up before we leave. Trust us, Pat.
It's very odd.
Jeez. Next item in front of us is item 14G, Resolution AR 2010-351, a resolution of the municipality bank appropriating $199,000 from South Central. This is Emergency Alcohol Community Services Program. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record. Anyone at all? I'm sorry, I didn't hear your camera talking.
I'm sorry. Hi, my name is Phyllis Spencer-Bowles, and I'm a graduate of the Anchorage Police Department Citizens Academy, and I volunteer for Community Patrol, and I used to be on the Anchorage search team. But I was also a security guard for 6 years, and as a security guard for 6 years, I dealt with a lot of the homeless, and I'm also making a homeless documentary as well. And from my assessment of the homeless, and I know I'm not a professional, a lot of mental health issues arise, and they're duly diagnosed with more than just mental illness, but alcoholism as well. And I would suggest that you look into having CSP offer the homeless an option to get out of the 24-hour hold early if they check themselves into a long-term psychiatric facility, or if you can have CSP work with professional psychiatric nurses where they can try to get them more than 24-hour help. I think this will lower the burden on the municipality of Anchorage. Also, I know that APD works after hours instead of CSP to pick up the homeless, and I know that not all of the APD patrol officers are crisis intervention trained. I would like to request that more patrol officers at night become crisis intervention trained so that they can assess the homeless to see if they're a danger to themselves or others, or if they're suicidal. This will help as well, and it'll take away the revolving door of 24 hours there, and put them into a long-term facility where they can get more help. Thank you.
Paul has a question for you, ma'am.
No, just a comment. That's okay. I just wanted to give...
Paul has a question.
Not a question, just a comment. I just wanted to thank you for your years of service and helping to better the community, and you brought us some good points, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions from assembly members? If not, appreciate it. Anybody else wish to testify on this issue, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying none. Public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Move to second. Discussion from assembly members.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gutierrez.
I just have a quick question to the administration on the Community Services Patrol, the CSP. What are their geographic boundaries? Or do they have geographic boundaries? Do they have? I'm told that they have an area to which they're limited.
They do have a geographic boundary, but it's pretty broad. I can't remember exactly, but I mean it covers downtown Spenard, it covers Muldoon, so it certainly covers the major areas where the most calls for service come from. I don't know if it expands further south than that or not. Ken, do you know? No.
Does not expand to the south.
So if someone calls for the same sort of thing that they might be picked up for downtown in the Diamond area, they're not, CSP won't be able to, is that because of lack of, the chiefs both want to come up.
Assemblyman Gutierrez to the chair. We don't remember the exact boundary off the top of our heads, but we're pretty sure it includes Midtown. I don't think it goes down to South Anchorage. There is, the Diamond Mall maybe, I think, is outside of the boundary.
And why is that? Is that a budgetary thing? Is that through some sort of operational concern?
I'm going to guess here. I think that back when we first started this years and years ago, maybe there was only so much money and we looked at what the need was way back then. Things have changed since then.
Chief Hall.
But the money still remains tight.
Right.
You got both chiefs for one bid, huh?
2 for 1 tonight.
Mr. Gutierrez, through the chair, I believe it started with the downtown partnership, and that's why it started as a smaller entity. And as it's grown, now HH&S is going to be handling that contract, and I do believe, as the chief said, it goes to Midtown Tudor area.
Chief Mute, do you recognize any need for CSP services south of that boundary? Are our officers picking up people that we'd rather have CSP deal with?
Anecdotally, I can tell you that we would be thrilled to have more. I can't articulate the numbers right now, except I can tell you that I think CSP is picking up about a third of the transports. AFD is picking up about a third, and we're picking up and transporting about a third. How many of those are on the south end, I can't tell you tonight. Certainly, there are some that might be served if there was the wherewithal to do it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Paul?
Yeah, and going back with revisiting the base pass, we did have at one time upwards to 2 vans, and when the second van was available, they did stop at the Diamond Center. That was as far as south as they would go. So if you had anybody further south than that or to the west, they'd have to drive them to the Diamond Center, and then they'd pick them up from there. But I believe, and I'm not sure, that it would be something that worth questioning, because if there is more funding needed to perhaps place a second van, particularly in there's certain periods that seem to be statistically needed, I'd be willing to look at it, revisit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other discussion from assembly members? If not, please vote. Yes will approve it, and no will not. That's approved unanimously by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14H.
Mr. Chairman,
Ma'am?
at the request of Mr. Flynn, I'd like to move to reorder the agenda once more to deal with the parking one. We have an answer.
Second.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Let's see, I believe there was a motion to approve.
There was a motion to approve the S version.
Thank you. After conferring with Mr. Wheeler, I would like to move to delete on page 3 of 3, lines 22 and 23, the section 3 language, basically saying the ordinance shall become effective immediately upon a passage and approval of 2/3 vote.
You want to renumber section 4 then?
Yes.
Okay. It's getting rid of 4. Just renumber 4 to 3. Get rid of 3 completely. If it passes.
And presumably...
And if I could get a second, I'll explain. Thank you.
Okay, Debbie?
Mr. Wheeler informed me that this was put in there just for clarification to the Assembly, and since any ballot measure requires this anyway, it's basically redundant, and it's a little confusing based on the conversation that Mr. Gutierrez and I had in our previous discussion. So I think it just simplifies it and makes it clearer to have it out.
Any other discussion from Assembly members? Is there any objection to the removal of this item? Not seeing an objection, that is removed. Thank you, Debbie.
And then, and I will urge support for the modified S.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have the modified S in front of us. Yes, Pat?
I'd move on line 25 to delete the proposition in section 2 and then in brackets 1 of. So it would then read, this ordinance shall become effective on June 1, if and only if, et cetera, just to conform with Ms. Oceaner's amendment.
Could I just take that as a friendly to my initial?
Yeah, we already did yours, so I figured I'd better.
Oh, okay.
Pat, the clerk wants to know what you're talking about.
On line 25, delete the words, the proposition in section 2, and then also the bracketed 1 of should be deleted, and then capitalize this
ordinance.
And I'll second that, Madam Clerk.
It's moved in second. Is there any objection from the body? Not seeing an objection, that's approved. We now have back in front of us the S version for voting. Any more discussion on the S version?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Just very briefly. I really just made up my mind about 5 seconds ago, and I am going to support this, although somewhat reluctantly, since, as I mentioned Friday, I am married to a victim of the former parking authority. But I do appreciate the hours and hours and hours and hours of work that have gone into this. And Mr. Flynn, you've done a lot of work, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
I mean, you get to go home tonight?
Well, we'll see what happens when I get home. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
You survived fire.
Any other discussion? If not, please vote. Got to have one.
It's not unanimous.
That's approved. It's not unanimous. It's approved. Okay. Good job, Patrick.
See what the voters say.
Okay, next item in front of us is H. Is going to be 14H. This is Resolution Air 2010-352, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $400,000 to the Municipal Department.
Waive reading.
This is for the Sexual Assault Response Team SART Center. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the
Move to
body?
approve.
Second.
Second, yeah.
Moved to second. Any assembly discussion? If not, please vote. That was approved unanimously. Next one in front of us, item 14I, Resolution AR 2010-353, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $123,750. This is for facility repairs of the Department of Health and Human Services. Public testimony is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public testimony is closed. What wish of the body? Moved and seconded. Discussion from assembly members. Please vote. That was approved unanimously, with the exception of Mr. Flynn. Item 14J is Resolution Air 2010-360, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating a supplemental award of $750,000 from the U.S. Department of Justice. This is the Anchorage Domestic Violence Prevention Program. Public testimony is now open on this item. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Good.
I'm sorry, I'm back again.
Not a problem.
Like I said earlier, I've done some volunteer work, and
Name and spell your last name.
okay, Phyllis Spencer Bells, and I know that the domestic violence grant may be in lieu of a lot of domestic violence within the Alaska Native community, and also I wanted to request that more patrol officers get domestic violence training, more intense. I know many Citizens Academy as well, they don't all have domestic violence training. And also cross-cultural communication because of the high rates of domestic violence against the Alaska Native as well as the other minority groups in Anchorage. And also, I know that the department would save money if the children or the victims were in the hospital or reported to the hospital, especially at the Alaska Native Medical Center, simply walked across the street to the Alaska Cares office, which is only across the street. It would save patrol a lot of money, and it would lessen the burden on the city. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any bills wishing to testify, please come forward. Hearing saying no in public testimony.
Move to approve.
Those wish of the body move.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay. Discussion from assembly members. Doesn't appear to be any. Please vote. He's not here. He's out there. That was approved unanimously by the body. Next item in front of us, item 14K, Resolution Air 2010-354, resolution appropriating $840,138 from Federal Highway Administration. This is for the Anchorage Metropolitan Area Transportation AMATS program. Public hearing is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Hearing and saying no in public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from assembly members. Doesn't appear to be any. Please vote. That was approved unanimously by the body voting. Next item in front of us is item 14L, Resolution Air 2010-355, a resolution appropriating $36,388 of contribution from the Area-wide General Fund 101. This is for capital assistance in the Public Transportation Capital Fund and Public Transportation Department. Public hearing is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record. Anyone at all? Hearing say no, and public testimony is closed.
Move to approve.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion from the assembly? Please vote. That item was approved unanimously by the voting body. Item 14M, Resolution Air 2010-356, a resolution of Municipality Bank appropriating $84,800 from Federal Grants Fund for 241, $36,438, and this is coordinated transportation services beyond the ADA requirement. Public testimony is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record. Anyone at all? Hearing is no one. Public testimony is closed.
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from assembly members. Please vote. That item was approved. Next item in front of us is item 14N. Resolution Air 2010-371, a resolution of Municipality Bank which appropriating a grant from U.S. Department of Transportation, $137,016.
Waive reading.
This is for the employment-related coordinated transportation services for low-income individuals within the municipality. Public testimony is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no one, public testimony is closed.
Move to approve.
But moved and seconded. Any discussion from the assembly members? Please vote. That was approved unanimously. Next item in front of us is item 14-0, Resolution Air 2010-365, a resolution approving a letter of agreement between Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska and the Anchorage Municipal Employees Association, modifying Article 7.1.1, holiday falling on a regularly scheduled day off. Public hearing is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record. Hearing and saying no in public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved, and is there a second? Moved and seconded. Discussion from assembly members. Please vote. That was approved unanimously by the body. Next item in front of us, item 14P.
Mr. Chairman?
Resolution, yes, sir.
I believe I may have a conflict on this as I receive, or at least eligible to receive funding for this.
You what, sir?
I'm eligible to receive funding from this particular fund here.
Okay. If that's the case, then, Paul, I'm going to say that you're out of here for a while. Go back and have some cake. It's your birthday, and don't forget, we will send a dog out or somebody to find you if you can't make it back in here. Okay, we now have a resolution on Air 2010-366. This is reimbursement of discounted health insurance premiums for retirees of the Police Fire Medical Expense Trust. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved in second. Discussion from assembly members. Please vote. Don't mess this up. That was approved by the body. Okay, if he can get back in here, he can come back. Item 14Q, Resolution Air 2010-367, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $200,000 of municipal cash pool earnings. This is to pay management and custodial expenses for the municipal cash pool. Public testimony on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Hearing and say no one. Public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body? Moved and seconded. Mr. Starr?
I should have asked this question ahead of time, but Ms. Mahoney, who do we actually pay this to when you're talking professional services as it related to that? And I maybe should know this, but you're paying $200,000 to a professional services group. And I guess, is it a distribution between the investment managers, or how are you managing this $200,000 appropriation?
The payments are made to our custodian as well as to our money managers. which would be PNC, BlackRock, and to KeyBank, U.S. Bank, pretty much all of the organizations that manage our money. And as our value in the cash pool is increased, those custodian fees are increased.
And through the chair, I guess what I thought what they had was a sort of a pay-for-performance appropriation. I've seen management fees and things subtracted directly out of the investment pools in behalf of that. Does this set aside the amount that will be appropriated through the year, or is this a one-time payment?
This is an increase in terms of what we had budgeted. It's important to note that the earnings that we've earned as a result of having a higher cash pool amount far exceed the cost associated with managing these funds.
I'm happy with the fees that we pay ahead for that, but, well, we'll talk offline on that, but it's, I'd like to see it tied more to performance than a flat rate, and that's perhaps an investment pool or management policies question that we'll bring in front of the board or something.
Let's talk about it, and I can show you a specific fund.
Any other questions, Mr. Starr?
Well, and then is this for 2011 coming up, or did we just appropriate this in arrears?
This is for 2010.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion from Assembly members? If not, please vote. We're up to 9. Where are the others?
Mr. Hall? Mr. Jackson?
Mr. Hall? Ms. Gray Jackson? Mr. Hall? Okay. That was approved by the body. Item 14R, Resolution AR 2010-370, resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $116,750.
Waive reading.
This is for payment principal interest on an interfund loan for the Eagle River Town Center. Public hearing is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one. In fact, the news media just shut their lights off. Anyway, hearing and seeing no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Second.
Discussion from Assembly members. Please vote. That's approved unanimously. Next item is 14S, Resolution AR 2010-368, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage Municipal Assembly appropriating $10 million to the Municipal Light and Power ML&P. This is the 2010 Municipal Light and Power operating budget. Public hearing is now open. Anybody who wishes to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Hearing and saying no one, public testimony is closed. So what's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Discussion from Assembly members. Please vote. That was approved unanimously. The next item in front of us is item 14T, Resolution AR 2010-369, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating an amount not to exceed $126,326. This is for a payment of interest on an interfund loan from Municipal Light and Power. Public testimony on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no, and public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Discussion from Assembly members. Please vote.
Ms. Osiander?
That's approved by the body. Next item in front of us, item 14, Resolution AR 2010-376, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $1 million of maintenance operation area-wide general fund. This is a partial payment for an interfund loan for Municipal Light and Power. Public testimony is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no, and public testimony is closed.
Move to approve.
The body. It's been moved and seconded, and I've got a change here. This is some amendments given to me by the administration. Do you guys all have this? It's got amendment number 1, amendment number 2, and number 3, and number 4. If somebody could move en masse on this, Debbie?
I'd actually like to get...
Oh, Patrick, I'm sorry.
I think we need to move them one at a time.
Okay.
And then if we could, if I get a second on moving amendment number 1.
Second.
And I'm sure we just need one explanation for what these are trying to do here. What's the necessity behind these, please?
George?
Somebody? Lucinda? I don't...
Mr. Flynn, are you questioning the reason why we changed or added the words "up to"?
If you speak to the package as a whole, that's probably simplest. Just why we need to make these changes.
Okay. In our 6-year fiscal plan, we had noted that we have a debt to MLNP of $3.6 million, and we had developed a plan to pay off a portion of that in 2010 and an additional portion in 2011. The 2010 payment was to be based on additional fund balance that we forecasted to have in 2010. So we believe that the Maintenance and Operations Department will come in under approximately $1.5 million in 2010. So we would like to use this money to pay off a portion of the MLNP loan, thereby reducing our interest expense in 2011. Additionally, we would like to transfer funds from the M&O budget to Fund 181 to help with the negative fund balance that currently exists in that account.
Okay, so just to clarify, the reason for the modification is we're not sure we're going to have exactly $1.5 million, but we think in that ballpark-ish, and so that's what we put the up to language in there.
That's correct. As you know, at the end of the year, you have many moving parts in the accounting world.
You don't have the audit done yet? Where's the CAFR? What's going on here?
Yeah, it's not quite done, but we are forecasting that amount, but I wanted to be conservative and ensure that, we have your trust that we won't overdo it.
Thank you very much for the explanation, Ms. Mahoney.
Thank you. Debbie, do you have any questions on amendment number 1?
No, sir.
Is there any objection to amendment number 1? Not seeing any, that's been approved.
I'll move
amendment number 2.
So move.
Second.
Moved to second. Any questions on amendment number 2?
Just a comment.
Rationale?
Just a comment, and perhaps I'm not sure if the administration knows, but there have been some discussions by the Northeast Community Council to reach out to the state legislative body in support of funding for perhaps monies to make sure the purchase of that land for the park, purposes of a park there, Muldoon Track, is preserved and carried forward to the future. So if funding by some chance is allowed and it makes it through the governor's pen, I believe that might help in the sense of, I don't know where we'd be able to recapture the monies or where to redirect, but that may help. And again, that's just something I know they had on their CIP list from the community council level.
Thank you, Paul. Any objection to amendment number 2? Not seeing any, that's approved. Amendment number 3, please.
It is moved.
Second.
Moved to second. Any questions on amendment number 3? That's unanimous on amendment number 3. Not seeing any objection. Amendment number 4.
So move amendment number 4, please.
Second.
What? I'm sorry. Any objection to amendment number 4? Not seeing any. Amendment number 4 has been approved. Yes, we're on a manual system. I'm sorry, Barbara. Okay, please vote on the main motion as amended. Item 14U. That's approved. We voted on it. We didn't? I brought it up. Okay, so let's try it one more time. This is on the main motion, item 14U. For the record, please vote as amended. I voted. There. That's approved unanimously by the body. Next one in front of us is item 14V, Resolution 2010-372, resolution appropriating $2,475,000 from Anchorage
Waive
Economic
reading.
Development Corporation. This is for the planning, design, construction of miscellaneous projects, including the Girdwood Economic Development Block Grant. Public hearing is now open. Anybody who wishes to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no in public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body? It's been moved to approve and second. Any discussion from assembly members? Doesn't seem to be any. Please vote. That item is approved. Next item in front of us is item 14W. Resolution Air 2010-373, resolution appropriating $318,848 from the Chugach Birch Odigo River Rural Road Service Area. This is for road and drainage improvement projects. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Anyone at all? Huh? Okay. Seeing and hearing no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body? Patrick.
Second.
Patrick.
Bill's got it.
Just a question, is there anything for Yosemite Drive in here? I'm teasing.
Well, actually,
Just kidding, Mr. Chairman.
Moving on down. Any discussion from assembly
I'm
members?
going to have to invite Mr. Flynn to come drive on Yosemite Drive.
Please vote. That's done. It's approved. Next item in front of us is special orders. There don't appear to be any. We have unfinished agenda. There is none. We're now down to audience participation. Is there anybody that would like to address the audience on any issue? Any issue at all? Seeing no one, we're down to assembly comments. Debbie, I'll start with you. Mike?
No, thank you, sir.
Paul?
Nothing, sir.
Do we have somebody to take you home? Well, here at Van State, I'm not sure you can make it. Ernie?
I'll take a Geritol, sir.
No comment.
Bill?
Nothing, sir.
Patrick?
Happy Martin Luther King Day, sir.
Jennifer? Elvie?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chris?
I just want to take a moment to reflect on the passing of former Congressman Pollock, the father of our own Ron Pollock, and I just think it was it's just we see these giants of a former age passing on, and it's remarkable. But he did a lot of good for us, and appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Harriet?
No comment, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. We're adjourned. Have a nice night. Did we give? Okay. Don't tell me.